Okay, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the October 1st, 2015 meeting of the Sherborn Board of Selectmen. We've got a busy agenda this evening and we've got a lot of folks out there. David, would you please read the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, we'll vote to approve or amend the agenda and add topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance. And then a period of public comment where we'll hear about Ward Park playground build. Then consideration of request for a farm pond sticker as an auction item for the Dover Sherborn Education Fund Gala on November 7th. Then consideration of gift acceptance grant and an update on library expansion from the library trustees. And then 2 one-day liquor licenses. And then discussion of fields at Sherborn. And discussion of general chemical environmental impact with Mass DEP response. And then administrator report, then selectmen reports, set the next meeting, consideration of minutes, and consideration of warrant.
Okay, anything to add to the agenda? We have, Paul, you've got something?
Yeah, I've been hearing on the radio that there's this potential hurricane out there, and I see our fire chief in the back of the room, and I'm wondering if we could get a update on what might be in for the town of Sherborn.
I think he is prepared to do that. And so, yeah, we'll call on him during public comment. And
good.
Yeah, that's a well-timed request. Is there anything else? Okay, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And second? Okay, all in favor? Aye, the agenda is approved. We're off to the races. So we've got public comment, and I think first up, I don't know, Diane, if there's anybody on the sign-up sheet, but we'll go with the Ward Playground build. I know we've got some folks from that group here and ready to make a presentation. And if you could just introduce yourself and tell us about the playground. That's great, thanks.
Hi there, my name is Amy Kozlowski and I'm on the Sherborn Playground Committee, and I'm joined by other members, hardworking, dedicated members of the Sherborn Playground Committee. And we'd like to first thank all of the residents from the town of Sherborn for all their support and donations to this point. I think we are all beyond excited that the next 3 weeks we will be breaking ground and seeing this dream that we've been working hard on over the past 2 years become a reality. The vision, I think, for this space was that we would create a community space for all members and all residents of the town, and not only is it a play space, but it will also have some green space, benches. We'd like to see it as a gathering spot for our community, as well as having this amazing playground that our kids are beyond excited about. So I'd like to back up just a little bit and give a little bit of history of the playground. The current playground at Cemetery Lane, Ward Park, was subsidized and built in 1993 by a group of dedicated volunteers. That playground was loved for many, many years, including my kids. They loved to play there. Unfortunately, the weather took its toll, and it's no longer a safe place to play. So we are in the process of tearing down the current playground. The current playground committee was founded in the fall of 2013 after a meeting with Selectman Durensis, and it was decided that we would move forward with a playground committee and also a fundraiser to kick off this goal of creating a new play space. April 2014, we had Play by Design, a playground company that specializes in community-built playgrounds, come in, and they had a great day with the children of our community and also adults, where they surveyed many, many kids, and we still have those designs, and we focused on what the kids really wanted to see on a playground and what the adults really wanted to see on a playground. So today, I'm excited to say we've raised $175,000 in 2 years, out of our goal of $200,000. So we have a little ways to go still, but we are, I think, proud of our community that we worked really hard to get there, and proud of all the support that we've seen so far from businesses, residents, town officials. We achieved that goal through a dozen fundraisers, 3 newsletters, public meetings, many design revisions, and we feel like this playground is really going to meet our need and the community members' needs of a great play space for all. So we are here tonight to plead the support and efforts of the town, and we need volunteers. We chose a community build for a few reasons. One, we just, I think the idea of having a community space and having a community build brings the town together, and we've really seen that just in our work together as a committee. It's been an amazing experience for myself just to meet people that I wouldn't have normally met, and people have come out of the woodwork to help us. But that being said, we need some more people to come out of the woodwork. This project, this build, is going to start on October 20th, and it runs through October 25th. So it's over the course of 6 days, and each day we need 100+ volunteers on site to build this playground. And we will be led by 2 playground experts to help us and guide us. There's no, you don't necessarily need to be skilled. We'll take skilled or unskilled. We just need willing workers. And there are 3 separate shifts: a morning shift, an afternoon shift, and an evening shift throughout the week. The good news is that we will provide lunch and dinner and breakfast for anyone willing to come out and volunteer. And again, the community has stepped up. We've had some amazing food vendors already say yes to feeding us. We have Old School Pizzeria, Pizza Peddler, Panera Bread, Legal Seafood. The Girl Scouts is putting on this amazing feast. The Pine Hill CSA is sponsoring a meal. And it's another way for the community to come together after working a shift, sit down, enjoy a meal together, and then work on this project. One of the things that really stuck with me when we met with the playground design operator was the sense of community. He said usually when somebody comes out on Tuesday, the first day of the build, it's a blank slate. It's literally, it's hard to envision anything being there. And over the course of 5 or 6 days, this space gets created. And he said people really view it as life-changing because they've never seen anything from start to finish and have a community come together to work on it. And that really stuck with me when we met with him. Right now, we currently have about 400 volunteers signed up through our website. You can sign up sherbornplayground.org, and there's a little sign-up genius so you can select which time or times that you'd like to come down and help us out. And so we have 400 volunteers. We need upwards of 1,000, over 1,000 volunteers. So please tell your neighbors, bring a friend, call your parents, call your grandparents, call your children.
Buddies.
Yeah, whoever you know.
Buddies.
Yeah, whoever you know. Call them and tell them to come down. I really do. I think this is going to be a great opportunity to work on a project that doesn't always come about. You know, when was the last time you can say you built a playground together? Again, the dates are Tuesday, October 20th through the 25th. In addition to volunteers, we also need tools. There is a whole list of tools that we need to borrow, and we promise to give them back in better condition than they came. We'll clean them up for you. And it's a very organized system. They get cataloged, they get stored in a very secure trailer, and it's everything that everybody has: wheelbarrow, shovels, rakes, some tools that maybe a few of us don't have. But I encourage you to look at the list and sign up, and whatever you can do to donate back to the our playground committee would be hugely helpful. I feel like I might be missing something. What am I missing?
I don't think so. Can you think of anything, Elizabeth?
Did I miss anything? Okay. So please sign up. I think that is our, we really would like to spread the word. We really need people to come out and build with us. Even, I know a lot of workplaces will designate a community service day. So even if you work in a location where that is possible, encourage a small group of maybe your coworkers to come down and work on this play space. That would be awesome, and we would really, really appreciate it. We can't wait to see it all come together. It's going to be awesome.
Well, thank you for that, and thanks for all the volunteer time and all the thousands of people who are going to work on it. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Do you have any questions for us? Just a comment. I want to thank you all. I was one of the volunteers with the original playground, and there are a number of bricks there that
Yes.
have my children's names on them, which I understand will survive the
Staying.
process.
Staying.
I've also contributed to this, and I do plan to put in some time. I just don't know what my schedule is. That's why I haven't filled out the form yet. But the thing I want to draw attention to and commend you all for is the enormous amount of work that's gone into this. This is not a week, not a month, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, however long it's been. I know that people have put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of thinking, a lot of planning. That's just wonderful. So on behalf of myself and the board and the community as a whole, thank you for doing this. Our town is going to be better for what you're doing.
It's great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anything more, Sean? Mark? Nope. Okay, great. Good. Thanks for coming in. And we've got another public comment now by Nancy Hess, our tax collector. Oh, thank you. Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Those are $50, by the way.
They are?
Yeah. They take check.
I always say that our Sherborn taxpayers are amazing, and they are very conscientious, and our phone has been ringing off the hook because they haven't gotten their tax bills yet. So I'm here to assure you your tax bill is not lost in the mail. They haven't been issued. The good news is we finally have a tax rate set so we can move forward with issuing bills, and hopefully you'll see them in your mail next week. So the date that they will be due is adjusted because you didn't get them by they were not mailed by the last day of September, first day of October. So the due date on the tax bill will be moved to November 9th, which is a Monday. And there is a stuffer in it that, of course, we want you to read very carefully and not throw away with the envelope. And it will explain the different abatement processes with the assessors. And some of the new programs, the Veterans Program will be on that, and there'll be a form if you want to contribute to the tax aid program. So thank you all for being so conscientious and keeping track of the fact that you should have a tax bill, but they will be coming out next week.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. And now we've got our Fire Chief Morrissey, and he's going to talk about storm preparedness.
Well, it's kind of funny because 2 weeks ago, I believe I was here to mention to everybody that September was emergency preparedness month, and that you all should have a plan for usually our winter storms, snow and the ice and the wind and the rain. Well, as we all know, there's a hurricane out there. From the 5 o'clock update, it looks like it's going to go east of Nantucket now for Monday into Tuesday, and we're going to be on the west side of it, but of course this is Thursday, so as we all know, subject to deviation. But maybe we'll just be on the light rain and wind side. Any way you look at it, it's obviously a time to prepare. It's a time to make sure you watch the Weather Channel and have weather apps and National Weather Service forecasts. The town-wide, we're pretty well prepared. We're going to meet tomorrow morning with the police chief, myself, CM&D chief with David, and we're just going to make sure that all our equipment's up in order, firehouse, police, etc. Saws are ready, chippers are ready, just in case. But now's the time. You got a few extra days. It's perfect just to make sure. And if hopefully it goes out to sea, then you'll be set for the next storm. So we encourage you to plan. We'll keep the information going out to the board as we get it from the state. But usually the best is the news and the radio. And secondly, just wanted to remind everybody there's an open house for Fire Prevention Month at the firehouse this Saturday from 10 to 2. We encourage everybody to come on down. There'll be a host of activities going on. Hopefully the weather will be fine. We have a helicopter hopefully coming late morning, early afternoon if the weather's not too bad, amongst some other stuff. And we have plenty of goodies and giveaways for everybody. So if you have an opportunity with your activities on Saturday, come on down to the fire station. We'd love to see you, and it's all ages are welcome. It's not just the kids.
That's great. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Our experience in prior storms has been tremendous assistance from all the town departments, but less than stellar response from our utilities. NSTAR, now Eversource, has actually been fined by the DPU for failure to plan for prior storms. So it might make sense, in addition to the other things you're planning to do, to reach out to Eversource and to Comcast, Verizon, and make sure that they have Sherborn on their radar, and remind them that we are a community of wells and septic systems. We can't just walk down the street to a Roach Brothers and have public water and public sewer. We have to have power here, so that should something bad happen with the storm, it would be nice to be sure, if you reach out to them, make sure that we're on their radar.
As a matter of fact, I was over at Eversource yesterday in Westwood with a meeting with the Fire Chiefs Association and personally met with our representatives. They are very much aware that Sherborn is on their radar. I did get a mailing from them today, emailing to say that they're watching. When things get a little bit closer, they will send out an email with phone numbers, contacts. I have our representative personally in the phone, able to get, as well as my officers. So and I believe we have it at the police station too, I think, but if not, I'll make sure with the police chief.
Yeah, we have it.
Right.
They actually sent out an email today.
Right, I got the same one. Yeah.
So they're well aware.
Excellent. Good. Thanks a lot, Chief. So next on our agenda here is consideration of a request for Farm Pond sticker as an auction item for the Dover Sherborn Education Fund Gala event.
Move approval.
Yeah, David, do you have anything to add on that?
This is something that comes up each year, and they need the selectmen's approval in order for us to donate a pass for Farm Pond for them to auction off at their event. And it's going to be held on November 7th, 2015.
Okay.
It's actually the 6th, sorry.
November 6th?
6th.
Okay.
The boosters use the money that they raise to benefit the school system.
DICF. It's not the boosters, it's the
Oh,
Dover Sherborn.
excuse me, yes. But they use the money to assist the schools. So
Okay. Great.
we have in the past routinely approved this, and we should continue to support whatever they do.
So we've got a motion to approve. Do we have a second? Okay, all in favor? Aye, that's approved. Now we've got the Library Board of Trustees, so from educating our children's bodies to their minds. The Education Fund, and now we've got the whole town.
Thank you. I'm Mary Moore. I'm chair of the Library Trustees. We're thrilled to be here tonight. We've got a lot of I think all the trustees here, most if not all. And I'm just going to go through a few quick slides to update you on the project. And then at the end, we have a big check to give you. So after many years of planning, hard work, we are on our way. We're on our way seriously in a fast way now. So the Sherborn Library has been a treasured institution for over 150 years. Elizabeth and I were just talking about this yesterday, and it was one of the first libraries in the state. Is that correct, Elizabeth?
The legislation in 1860 for municipalities to appropriate funds for public libraries. Sherborn was one of the first towns to take advantage of that.
And the current building, as we all know, has served us very well for over 44 years, and this project will ensure that the next 40 years, we're in good shape for the next 40 years. In April of this year, we had the unanimous vote of support at annual town meeting. In May, we had the ballot question pass at the polls. In June, we convened our library building committee. In July, we received official word from the MBLC of our $3.6 million grant. In August, we acted on a recommendation from the LBC to hire an OPM, our owner's project manager. In September, we signed the grant acceptance letter. And just this week, we have received from the MBLC the grant contract, and we have filled out the paperwork to request the first payment from the state for over $700,000. We're waiting for the library building committee to make a recommendation on the design firm, and then we will move ahead with the design phase and the construction phase. And I think you may remember Stacy Brandon ran through this at town meeting, but this shows the phases that we're working through. This next important phase coming up is the design phase. We're going to regroup with all the town committees and the departments that we met with during the grant process. We hope to get some final design approval by the early part of next spring. And if all goes well, we have a spring 2017 anticipated opening. Just to review the funding, we have a $3.6 million MBLC construction grant. We're contributing $2.8 million in private funding. There's a $1 million municipal contribution for a total estimated project cost of $7.4 million. Any questions on that? No? So it really gives us great pleasure to be able to thank everybody who's helped us get to this point and who's helping us get to the next point of completion. I'm just going to read this off, but to the trustees, the staff, all the friends of the Sherborn Library, the campaign committee members, donors, the Library Design Study Committee, and all the town officials, including this Board of Selectmen, who've helped us and given of their time and talents, thank you, thank you, thank you. And to those who are now driving the important design and construction phases forward, especially our newly formed Library Building Committee, town officials, Dave Williams, Diane, thank you, and Elizabeth and her staff, all the trustees, and again, the departments and committees who've helped over the years, thank you. And I'd like to just sort of do a special nod of thanks to Stacy Brandon and to Elizabeth, who really brought us to this point with consistent leadership and cheerfulness. So thank you. And they never gave up. They stuck with it, and we're on a fast pace now, thanks to their work. And another nod to Steve Borgeson, who really so ably chaired our campaign, our capital campaign committee, and we exceeded our wildest dreams in terms of fundraising. So we're very, very pleased about that. And now, without further ado, everybody should come up. We have a very big check. Of this for a photo op, so if all the trustees could come up and maybe we could get in front of us. I'll put the light on.
Yeah, get us some.
That's great. So it doesn't fit in the ATM machine.
I don't know how we want to do this. So we get in front of the selectmen. Guys, come on around here.
Yeah, so we'll stay behind the line, okay?
Yeah, there you go. Peek over. You can do a panorama picture.
I need Sarah. You need to move. You can move too? Yeah, you do too, Kathy.
Sarah, keep right there.
Thank you. Oh, that's improving. All right, one more.
Thank you. So we'll probably
Fantastic. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you guys for your support.
But to make it official, could I move that we accept it before they leave with the money?
It's okay, so we have a motion, we have a second on the motion? Second. Okay, further discussion, other than thank you very much, and all in favor? Aye. We've now accepted $2.8 million, that's good. Should we adjourn now? That's, I think it's going to get better than
Hard to top that. This is the highlight.
We should adjourn and all resign. Okay, we've got 2 liquor licenses on our agenda next. And David, is everything in order for these licenses? One is for the Norfolk Hunt Club Luncheon on October 3rd at the Community Center, and
Yes.
one is for a private party on October 17th at the Community Center.
Yes, all the paperwork is in, and we have an updated insurance certificate from one of the applicants.
Yeah, if anybody had noticed, the package on the October 17th had an insurance certificate with the wrong date, but there is a correct certificate in the file, and I've seen it. David's got it. So, all right, so do we have a motion to approve first the October 1st license request to Norfolk Hunt Club?
So moved.
For Robert Schumann's Aptics Delicatessen. Second on that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye, so that's approved. And now, a one-day license to Pauline Bounds for October 17th for a private party at the community center.
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. 4-0, those pass, and we are on to the next item, which is,
Did you sign this?
you can certainly sign them. We'll sign them before we leave anyway.
On the agenda item for the fields at Sherborn, they
That would be
sent
the
out
next item,
a
yeah.
request to have people come at 6:30, so I'd request on their behalf that we not start that until 6:30.
You got 2 minutes.
Yeah, actually it says 6:35.
Minute 45 seconds.
So you may want to,
Well, we can,
so what about doing general
we
chemical
can do some
first?
minutes, is what we can do.
Okay.
We've got minutes for 2 meetings to approve. One of them is July 28th, and one is August 12th. So do we have a motion on those minutes? Has everybody who was there had a chance to look at them? And I've given comments on August 12th to Diane already.
Move approval.
Okay, so we've got a motion to approve July 28th. Are there any changes on that one? No? Okay, second on that?
Sure.
Oh,
Second.
all in favor on July 28th? Okay, and now we've got August 12th. I did give Diane some changes, so if we could move approval with the edits, most of which were typo, style type edits.
Move approval.
Okay. Second. All in favor? Aye. We've almost got to 6:30, Paul.
We need to slow down.
No? No?
What about starting the town administrator's report?
I don't know, we've got, expected we would have more people here for the other 6:30 item too, so. Do you have a report, David?
Yes, one thing we've been discussing about health insurance and changes and talking with employees and setting up the insurance advisory committee. We'd also like to meet with the new superintendent at the school in executive session on Tuesday night. This is the regional school at 7:30, and we'd kind of like to have a selectman attend, and so I guess we would be looking for some sort of selectman liaison to stay with us through the process, specifically focused on health insurance options.
Is anybody interested in that? roll, or should we give it to Chuck, who isn't here?
Yeah. Second.
What's the date again?
This meeting is Tuesday night at 7:30, and we just found out about this.
It's next
a day
Tuesday?
ago. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm
Very short notice.
not sure Chuck is available for next Tuesday. I don't think I'm available. Is anybody available?
I mean, it can be.
How long is the process going to be after this meeting?
It could be months.
David, you're going to be there, right?
Yeah, both the finance director and I will be there, and we can represent the selectmen and just report back and see how it goes.
Yeah, and if it turns out somebody can go, they can go.
I can
Yeah,
probably go. I
we don't
can't
have to
commit
post a
to
meeting.
further meetings after that.
Okay, no, that's fine. So we'll definitely be there representing, and then if one of you decide you want to go, it's 7:30 at Tuesday night in the middle school library.
Tuesday night, 7:30 in the middle school library.
The meeting starts, I think, at 6:30, but this is a hard stop at 7:30 for this executive session.
So it's going to be discussed at 7:30.
Right,
Okay.
for sure, yeah.
There's only one license here, is there not?
I sent the other one the other direction, Paul.
Okay.
I'll just share the wealth here. Okay, and it is past 6:30, Paul, and I think we should call the fields discussion, which was your request, and the agenda item is for the selectmen to consider a position. I'll just start by saying this is a subject that's been well covered and is going to be well covered by the Board of Appeals. I'm kind of reluctant to turn this into a duplicate hearing on the matter. We don't have any jurisdiction over the matter. There may be questions that people have, and I think among our board, at least, we need to talk about what, if any, position we are going to take, or what, if any, additional comment we're going to make to the Board of Appeals.
We've already submitted a comment, and I asked for that to be included in the packet, and I believe it is included in the packet. That's the second item. They are dated May 6, 2015. And I thought we would perhaps discuss tonight a couple of things. As I said in a memo dated September 16th, we want to be sure that town council is available to the Board of Appeals. We want to make sure that they have all the experts that they need. We want to be sure that all the town boards and committees are supporting them, and that includes the police chief and the fire chief and the CM&D director. And I guess they are also counting on the Conservation Commission and the Board of Health to support and provide information to the Board of Appeals. We have to understand that the Board of Appeals has got to decide the issue before it based on the record in front of the Board of Appeals. And if there is no record of problems with the... Yes.
Excuse me, wait, we've got discussion up here right now. Thank you.
So if, for the Board of Appeals to have reasons to impose conditions and to possibly even deny the project, it has to have information before it presented in the record as part of the record before the Board of Appeals. So that leads then to the question of what can we do to supplement that record. And at the last time this was discussed by the board, I had suggested perhaps we want to beef up the comments from the Board of Selectmen, hence the copy in the packet of what we did back in March 26. But more importantly, there was this recent decision by the Massachusetts Appeals Court which indicated that local standards could be upheld if there's evidence before the Board of Appeals. And in order to get support for the local standard, particularly with regard to wells and septic system, there is going to be a need for some kind of presentation made to the Board of Appeals from the point of view of nitrogen loading on adjacent wells, the hydrology, the impact on abutters' wells. In addition to that, the Conservation Commission has serious concerns here about the proximity to the wetlands. What makes Sherborn unique, or relatively unique in the Commonwealth, is that we have no public water supply. And because we have no public water supply, all of our residents depend upon wells for their drinking water. And therefore, all of Sherborn is essentially a Zone 1 for public wells, because that's what we drink. So I think the basis is there to maintain local standards for protection of our water supply, which includes not only the issue of wells and septic systems, but also the wetland protection. The protection of wetlands directly assists in maintaining the quality of our groundwater.
Paul, pull that mic closer to you. I think they're having trouble hearing you.
Okay.
Sorry.
So,
Better.
so what I'm trying to say is that there is a need for an expert that would provide some hydrology to the Board of Appeals. So I guess there are this list of things that I've enclosed in my memo of September 16th, and I would add to it the idea that perhaps the town or this board might take steps to make sure that there is an expert on water issues who would be available to the Board of Appeals to provide the kind of information that was used in this recent case of Reynolds versus Stowe to uphold the revocation of a comprehensive permit. So those are my general thoughts. I know there are people here who are familiar with the project and who are abutters, and I really would invite the board to listen to them.
Well, I guess that's a threshold question for the board, Paul, is if we're going to have a hearing on this, or if we're going to have, questions or some type of discussion. I don't know if the applicant's here. I wasn't really thinking this was a hearing because we don't have any jurisdiction over this project, and I know
I'm not asking for a hearing.
comments have been aired in front of the Board of Appeals, presumably, which does have jurisdiction, and I'm not sure what you're suggesting. I mean, it's
Well, at the last meeting, I called upon the board to take a more proactive step of actually opposing the current design of the project. And to further our prior comments, this project is too dense on too small a piece of property with too many environmental impacts with regard to our water. And although that was partially articulated in our March 26th memorandum to the Board of Appeals, I think that needs to be deepened, broadened, and strengthened.
Do we have anything from the Board of Health on the type of consultant you were looking for? The water supply consultant, the septic impact consultant?
There is a report in our packet from the Board of Health, but this goes back to March, and I don't have anything current here, but I see there are members of the Board of Health here.
I guess I just raised that because I think you've got, you know, the point seems to be that we've got our health regulations in danger, and I don't see that as directly a Board of Selectmen responsibility, but I do think the Board of Health has been very involved in this, and
Well,
presumably is covering that issue.
I'm trying to emphasize that there is two related issues. One is in the jurisdiction of the Board of Health, the other is in the jurisdiction of the Concom, but it is the total of the two and its effect on the drinking water of the town, which was recognized as the kind of local concern that can trump a 40B. That needs to be developed, and I think it needs more than just the Board of Health and the Concom each working industriously and diligently on their own issues. There needs to be a more comprehensive approach to this, which in my book means hiring an expert or setting in place the arrangements by which the developer would pay for this kind of expert that would address particularly this kind of issue. And I think our role as the elected representatives of the people is to represent the people and to protect our residents from something that could really adversely impact not only the quality of the water for the immediate abutters, but the quality of the water for the entire town. We have consistently, this board and prior boards have consistently acted to protect the quality of the water in the town from developments both within the town and developments that are on the border of this town. And unless we maintain that kind of vigilance, and unless we're ready to commit whatever it takes, remember that song from Jackson Browne, you know, send lawyers, guns, and money. We need to fight for our residents, and we need to fight for the protection of our drinking water.
Can I jump in here?
Please.
After Paul brought this up at the last meeting, I contacted him and asked him to see if we could get this on the agenda through you. And I understand that we don't have a direct jurisdiction here. And you know, one of the strengths of Sherborn is all of our elected boards and the participation of all the residents. But I think it's also a weakness in that we're faced with something that's, you know, pretty well organized, very hard for these boards to come together and act in a concerted fashion. And is that a role, you know, just like I think we made ourselves very clear about the general chemical situation, and we sort of take a coordinating role on that. Is this another similar situation where either the board or through David, we can provide that coordination and that leadership?
Here, here. Thank you.
You got anything to say on this one, Sean? Or?
Well, some. One, I know a lot about a lot of things, but I don't know a whole lot about this 40B project. I know almost nothing, except people tell me this it's too dense. I don't know whether that's true or not. There is some experts that work for town that might weigh in. I'm pretty sure as of late the Board of Health probably couldn't even weigh in on that because I'm not sure they have enough information. We definitely don't. I think we should use caution, giving the impression that we were just totally against 40B and we're going to raise lawyers and everything else to fight any 40B. Because there is a message to the next guy that's going to call the state and file a 40B. We'd much rather work with them. So we need to be careful with the message we make tonight or in the future, because it has impacts that are going to continue. And I'm not coming out against or for this project. I don't really know anything about it. But I don't think we want to fight them as a whole. because we could be working with people. And I think we should learn lessons from Whitney Street and the path we took there and the money we spent there.
Okay, and I think the next question, which I'll put to the board, is do we want to hear from the public on comments about substantive comments? Do we want to hear from the public about comments on what they think the selectmen's role should be?
Yeah.
And I think those are two different things.
I know that people are here, and they're citizens of the town, and I think they have a right to be heard, and I think they should be heard. So I would urge you to...
Heard on what subject, Paul? I guess that's the question.
Well, certainly, the issue that I've been trying to bring up here is for the Board of Selectmen to be more proactive on this project. So that certainly is the subject at hand, and they should be heard on that. But if there's some...
I'd be interested in hearing that. I don't know that I'd be interested in having the merits of the project debated in this form, because I don't think we have a role on the merits of the project.
I agree.
Yeah. So I would be interested in hearing, if everybody's okay with that, hearing from people what they think our role could be in terms of helping the town to fairly evaluate this project and raise, with technical support, any issues that there are.
Can I make another suggestion?
Yeah.
As I see a couple of board members raising their hands, might we want to open it up to them first as we hand it to the public?
Yes, I think it's a great idea.
I just saw Daryl and I see.
Yeah, so I mean, Daryl or Rebecca, you both had your hands up, I guess, from the Board of Health. Do you want to, or from the Water Commission and the Board of Health, or how's this work?
Come to the mic.
Yes, please go to the microphone, whoever's going to talk first. And thank you for being here, Daryl and Rebecca, and anybody else from town boards, everybody else from town boards.
Okay, Daryl Beardsley, 54 Forest Street, and Board of Health member. Is that better?
Yeah.
Better?
No, I'm not asking.
Better?
No, don't do that.
Just on one of your comments about whether it's trying to make arguments for or against, what Mike mentioned, though, struck a chord for me, is that we just need the information to understand how the project's going to work and what the public health issues are. So we are anticipating information coming from the project applicant, but we haven't seen everything yet, so we are a bit in limbo on certain aspects of it and what the impacts will be on, for example, drinking water quality is certainly of primary concern. So I think there may be need for additional technical input into our process of evaluation.
Is that after you receive the information, you mean, or in?
It depends on what we receive.
Okay. And is there a
it
deadline?
depends on whether we receive everything we anticipate receiving per our regulations, and then whether it's sufficient to evaluate what those impacts are or not. So there could be a number of levels of evaluation. It could be to fill gaps. It could be, we have the peer reviewers who can review what was presented. And then if there's some difference of opinion about methodology selected or something like that, it may then be, the peer reviewer may be able to provide that, but if for some reason it's for an area that's outside their particular expertises, then we may need additional support for that.
And is there a deadline for you to receive that information? Has the applicant agreed to submit by a date certain?
We're about to send out something to them, a letter. I'm composing a letter saying what a date will be.
Oh, we got the applicant here. Good. Excellent.
So we've had agreements, verbal agreements, that certain information would be coming, and we've put out information about what we would like to see. But we also have the December 16th deadline looming, and I'm not sure if we still need to go ahead and have a decision by then, with or without the information. I'm not sure on that, and so we're looking forward to the meeting on the 19th to understand that better.
Okay.
In terms of how that affects us. And if we don't get the information, I don't think we should be making a decision without the analyses that we see as necessary.
Okay. Great.
So.
Anybody else up here have anything for Daryl?
Who, the deadline? Well, whose deadline is that? Who imposed that?
That was a continuance by the Board of Appeals, and I think agreed to with the applicant, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that's a decision deadline or a hearing close deadline.
Okay.
Rebecca, please, thank you.
Rebecca Honeywell, Woodland Street. I just want to expand on what Daryl said. We have, the Board of Health has a procedure. An application has certain information that needs to be included in order for the application to be received. We have not received the complete application yet. We do not have a map that shows us where the wells are. We've asked for it on multiple occasions. The other thing that we have requested on multiple occasions is the assessment of a hydrologist, and that is a requirement of the applicant, but they have not provided it. And this becomes complicated because the Board of Appeals has, the zoning board has a deadline which is approaching, and we're losing time for an expert to actually do an assessment. We're not going to have enough time for them to actually complete the assessment if it's not initiated. So last night, Daryl didn't mention it, but we discussed requesting your assistance. We're not able to comment on the merits of this project yet. We do not have the information we need to assess it. It's necessary because there are a lot of important questions that we obtain the information with ample time to make an appropriate assessment, because the public health could potentially be affected if there are some serious issues that are being raised by some of the people who have been involved in the discussions. The other question that we have for you, and this directly relates to the issue that you mentioned before Daryl arrived, is that multiple times we've requested that the developer provide this information, but they have not provided it yet. So we want to ask you, Daryl, is it okay if I ask, if you would allow us to, if they are not able to provide us the information in an adequate period of time, will you allow us to request your assistant, the town assistants, to initiate this evaluation by an expert on behalf of the town in order for that information to be available for us to make our assessment before the deadline, which is approaching.
Exactly what I was talking about.
So I want to understand, so should we hire and fund an assessment, or should we have the developer hire and fund an assessment?
Well, we've asked them to do that on multiple occasions, and they have not. At least they haven't given us evidence of it, and we're waiting for that. We would like it if they provide that information. The question is at what point do we as a town initiate that process? And then a separate issue is whose responsibility is it? Is that the developer's responsibility to fund whether or not we initiate it? Is this something that's important enough to the town that it's done in addition or independent of that determination of who pays for it?
You may have something to say on this.
Should I?
Yeah, if you don't mind, because I think the questions are really being asked of you, even though they're coming through us.
My name is Ben Stevens. I am the owner of 247 Washington Street. I am the applicant. Just to back up a little bit, there's sort of a process that we go through, and we committed to the zoning board for $35,000 for a third-party review. That's only probably 20% done at this point. What we had to do first, which was critical, was through the end of August, we had to come to agreement with the peer review on stormwater management, which we did. That greatly affects a lot of things on the site. So we were kind of in a holding pattern until that could get resolved at the end of August. We have no problem. The peer review currently has Beta, a structural engineer, a civil engineer. They have a hydrologist, they have a wetland scientist, and they had a traffic review. All on my dime, but technically working for the town. There is a litany of information that needs to be delivered back to the town, to the Board of Health especially. They did make requests of us on groundwater flows for well impacts, septic mounding, septic impacts, all of which we had no problem delivering. Never said we wouldn't, but a lot of this is a work in progress. I actually got the Board of Health review letter September 20th, so it would have been fruitless to go ahead and review on the peer review, and then 9 or 10 days ago I got the comments from the Board of Health. So for me to actually do a review and then go back and do it again after I get their comments is a little counterproductive. So all we've ever asked in this project, we asked the zoning board, was that since there was so much linkage between conservation, the buildings themselves, the septic design, and the well, that they be looked at as a whole and as a process we go through. I have no problem if we need to go beyond December 21st once we provide that information. We're proposing some changes in our septic plan. We've never changed the location of our buildings, of our wells, of our roads, of our access, even of our drainage system, but we had to get the location confirmed through the peer review first before we could finish our design on everything else. So nothing is substantially changed in the plan. We hope to have it to them by the middle of next week to the Board of Health. We have submitted final comments to the Conservation. They have told me 5 weeks ago that they were going to give me some plan changes. I do not have those plan changes. If they give me those plan changes and I agree to incorporate them, that is going to translate to multiple changes back to the Board of Health. So this is a process. I understand it's a process. I am not trying to hold a gun to anyone's head on timing. I've done 7 40Bs. They've all been very cooperative with the towns. I'm not trying to force anything down anyone's throat. We need to vet this project environmentally. We need to vet the septic impact, the well impact. I understand that completely, and we're in the process of doing that. And if it takes longer than mid-December, then it will take longer than mid-December. I don't have an issue with that.
Thank you. I think that's helpful information for everybody to hear. Do we have any other board members who want to speak? Anybody here from Concom or Board of Appeals, Planning Board? No? Okay. So, and we've got some residents. Is that who else we have? So, you know, again, and with comments about the process, not comments on the merits of the project. Okay. Yeah, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Hill. I'm an attorney for the neighbors of the project.
Oh, we saw your letter. Thank you.
Oh, great. Great. So just a little bit of background on what happened last night. The Board of Health met, as you heard. They discussed this issue, and they actually took a vote, 3-0, to request that the Board of Selectmen retain a hydrologist to perform a hydrology study of the project. I believe I don't know if we have a copy of the vote, the motion that was taken, but the motion is very clear on what the scope of the hydrology study would be. And that actually came straight out of a hydrology study that was done in the town of Carlisle about 6 to 8 months ago on a very similar project that involved a for-sale housing project on a small parcel with both on-site septic and on-site wells. Town of Carlisle Board of Selectmen hired a hydrologist named James Vernon. Mr. Vernon had a scope. He did a full hydrogeologic comprehensive assessment to study the impacts of that project septic system on the wells, both on-site as well as the wells of the abutter. That project contained bedrock. This project also has bedrock soils. The wells are bedrock wells. On-site septic, on-site wells. So the similarities are great. And we, on behalf of we the neighbors, requested the Board of Health to support a request to you folks to have an independent hydrogeological study. Now, the reason we think that that's necessary here is that the peer review process under Chapter 40B has limitations. Your peer reviewers, and Mr. Stevens is correct, there's a civil engineer peer reviewer, Beta, and there's also a hydrologist. But their scope is only to review the documents that are submitted by the developer. So the peer reviewer can't go off and do a separate study to determine what the impacts of the septic system will be in the wells. So that's why we feel it's necessary that there be somebody independent involved in this project, which is why the Carlisle Board of Selectmen hired the individual in that project. So the firm that we recommend is the firm that did the work in Carlisle. That would cost around $10,000. This is not a cost that you can assign to the developer, because the developer can't be assigned that cost under the rules of Chapter 40B. So this cost would have to be borne by the town of Sherborn. One of the reasons we're asking for this is that, as Mr. Durensis pointed out, the world kind of changed about 2 weeks ago under 40B. There's now a roadmap for municipalities on how to handle these kind of applications that present serious public health and environmental threats. The case in Reynolds versus Stowe is actually almost identical to the facts in this case. It also included a private septic system serving 37 units and private wells around the project site. And in that case, the zoning board issued the comprehensive permit. My client in Stowe appealed that permit. We appealed to the Superior Court, then we went to the appeals court, and the appeals court reversed the permit and revoked it on the grounds that that septic system was going to contaminate the wells of the neighbors. That was the evidence that we produced, and unfortunately it took several years of litigation to get to that point. But the important takeaway from the appeals court decision was that boards have the right, zoning boards have the right, to insist upon compliance with local bylaws, local environmental protection bylaws, if they're necessary to protect drinking water. Now, in order for a zoning board to make a decision like that, to deny a waiver, for example, and there are a lot of waivers that are being requested as part of this project, and the developer has the right to request them. That's the whole point of 40B, is to do a comprehensive permitting process. But for the zoning board to deny a waiver under Chapter 40B, it has to have a scientific justification to do that. It just can't say, we don't like the project, or we think it's too dense. It has to have a scientific basis. And without that, their decision would be vulnerable for an appeal. So we feel it's necessary to have a scientific study to determine whether or not there are impacts on the wells. As I stated last night, this is not about us trying to stop the project. No one's trying to kill the project. This is about making sure that my client's wells are protected. And frankly, the project's residents' wells are protected, because our initial analysis, which I think you have a copy of, indicates that the nitrogen levels from the septic system will exceed state standards, 10 milligrams per liter, not just on my client's properties, but also on the project site itself. Most of the wells on the project site will exceed 10 milligrams per liter, according to Scott Horsley, a hydrologist that we hired 2 weeks ago to review this and did a nitrogen loading model. Scott's nitrogen loading model follows the DEP Title V protocol. The applicant has not provided a nitrogen loading model for this project, despite the fact that this application has been open for several months. So I want to emphasize that if you decide to retain a hydrologist, this isn't to substitute anything that's happening with the zoning board or the Board of Health or the Conservation Commission. This is to supplement the work that's already being done. The zoning board still has complete authority to deny waivers, to impose conditions, and to make the ultimate decision. But this work that we're asking you to do will provide the zoning board with more information, and the Board of Health with more information, to make a decision of whether or not to waive these local bylaws that are meant to protect the drinking water. Thank you.
Exactly what I was trying to say, but said so much better. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Hill? Okay, thank you.
Michael Barberia, 15 Ward Lane. I'm a member of the Citizens Action Committee, the group that privately raised funds to retain Attorney Hill and the hydrologist Scott Horsley. I just wanted to confirm, do you have a copy of Scott Horsley's analysis?
I do not.
Can I present that?
I don't think we do, no. I don't think we've seen that.
Has this been given to the Board of Appeals?
This was given to the Board of Health yesterday.
But what about the Board of Appeals?
The applicant has this too?
I believe he has it as of this morning, but he can speak to that. So this was presented at the Board of Health last night, and as the attorney mentioned, the Board of Health did approve unanimously the request for funding from the Board of Selectmen for an independent expert. And on behalf of our group, I'd urge the Board of Selectmen to approve that funding. We definitely need an independent expert. Based on this, as indicated, there's already evidence, just based on an analysis, that the groundwater levels are going to exceed the acceptable amount of nitrogen for not only the wells in the development, but the abutters, and potentially further out because of the bedrock, the nature of bedrock. It's very important that we have to have this, because if it plays out, the way this is likely to, or may potentially play out, because we don't know what the Board of Health or the Zoning Board are going to decide yet. But based on this, it looks like the levels are going to exceed state limits. And if it comes to pass that the comprehensive permit is not granted, or if it's restricted to correspond to local bylaws for health reasons, then it's like we would anticipate the developer to appeal it to the housing, to HAC, which is a developer-friendly appeals process. And if all we can say as a town is that we didn't get all the information we requested from the developer, and therefore we denied a permit, that's not going to be very compelling. We need to have our own data conducted by a reputable, independent expert to determine, for the boards to make their decisions. And so I would urge now, as the attorney mentioned in Carlisle, the fee for that was about $10,000. It's a public record. But we don't know, we haven't quoted it, so we don't know, it could be a little more. I think this project is a little bit bigger than the one in Carlisle, and based on what came out of the Board of Health yesterday, the scope could be larger. Additional testing for pathogens and things like that. So I would urge that the board approve maybe a cap of $15,000 for this type of analysis.
Next question? Yeah, please. I think the idea of a hydrologist is a good one, and I'm sympathetic to it. But apparently, the residents who are going to be affected have organized themselves and paid for the lawyer and this expert. Why should the Board of Why do you feel the Board of Selectmen should pay for this one?
Well, this is a town issue. I mean, we are sort of a subset of the town. And so we feel that it should be congruent, but we don't want, if we privately fund something, I think it's not going to be as good as the town funding it. This is a town health issue. And fundamentally, really, so far no town funds have been expended at all. We've retained the attorney and hydrologist on our own funding, and no town council work has been done, and the developer has paid for the beta review. So no town funds have been expended at this point. And based on what's at stake, there's no plan B. If these wells fail, there's nowhere they can put them. There's nowhere else they can put them on that property. And so what's the alternative? To have water come in from Holliston or trucked in? I mean, it's a high-stakes game. And I think it's vital that we know what we're looking at before the boards have a chance to decide.
I got a question, but I really, it was going to be, it's probably what Daryl's about to say, actually. I'd love to hear from her. And while she's walking up there, did we know about their vote last night?
No.
Because they're not here requesting that. You're not here requesting us to move on.
We are supporting that the town would provide information. So here's another perspective from the Board of Health, going to your question about why would the town look at this. The Board of Health has a lot of questions about the process, about the legal issues. Again, maybe the meeting on the 19th will help illuminate some of that. But part of our concern is that what are the risks that may be posed to the people who are going to live in this particular development? We're being asked to judge the project from a public health perspective, and we don't yet have the information. We may receive the information. We don't know. We didn't know about timing. So that's where I think it becomes a health issue. Is that some liability if we say, sure, it looks great, and it turns out not to be great, and there are problems, and we don't really have alternatives, alternative water resources. We're fairly limited in that regard. We only have a few edges of aquifers around the town for the most part. So we don't know what that would mean. And that's where I think it becomes a town issue. Are we opening ourselves up to liability when these people move in and things don't quite work out, either quantity or quality-wise or some other issue of public health? So.
But my question, my question was, he just asked us, well, two people just asked us to spend 10 or 15,000. Did you ask us that? Is that what your vote was last night? Because we don't have that. It wasn't, I mean, it's
No, our
obviously
vote did not have a dollar value attached. It had a need for technical support for the Board of Health. And there were two tracks. There were two votes. One was the need for more technical information regarding this project, and the second was also a letter to the applicant saying, these are the things we really need to be able to evaluate this project. Can you provide it by? And we had chosen a date of October 9th. So, and part of that also in the letter says, are you sticking to the December date or not? How are we going to be held to it? How does that figure in to the evaluation in general?
So let me just, so I understand, you think you want information for the Board of Health from the town. So it's not really a request to the Board of Selectmen for funds. I don't know that we have funds for the Board of Health, right? I mean, we have selectmen funds that are budgeted, and the Board of Health has
services.
and the Board of Health has funds, right?
And we also can go to advisory committee and ask for a reserve fund transfer.
I guess my point is a little different than that. My point is
Board of
the
Health
Board of
does
Health
not have funds for that.
But so we're the only board that can ask for funds, is what you're saying?
I don't know.
Because I would think if the Board of Health thinks this is something that they want funds for to help their analysis, they'd be in the best position to ask for those funds, not the Board of Selectmen. You know, I mean, do you have those funds in the budget? Do you have a way to get those funds into your budget? And if you don't, can we work with you to figure out a way to get those funds into your budget?
That would be great, and that's part of then the email I sent to the various boards and committees saying, could we all the boards get together so we understand what the process is to work through this? How do we get town council advice without itemizing, and now I'm branching off into other questions that we've had, which is we do need some support on the legal front, and it's been difficult for us to formulate a single or precise questions that we vote on, present, because we just see them, well, the answer to that would lead to a cascade of other questions. So how do we pick what those isolated questions are? Can we get some more general support for that kind of thing, or understanding how we would seek funding? Because it's not in our budget. For us to do it would mean cutting back on the services to any applicant and residents coming before us. We would have to absolutely cut those services, and I don't think that's going to work. So I don't know what the mechanisms are.
David, I thought they had the authority to use legal counsel. They don't have to run that through us, do they?
Yes.
Well, through David.
Yes.
David is town administrator.
But we don't need a vote to approve them to use legal counsel,
David's
do we?
the gatekeeper.
No,
on legal
we
counsel.
need to vote on what our request is, and then formulating that precise request is difficult for something that's kind of open-ended like this.
I would suggest maybe you work with David in terms of trying to set up maybe you're the point person or somebody's the point person to have a one-on-one discussion with town council. It's not good that you have questions, legal questions that you haven't been able to have answered because there's a process. I mean, I think the process isn't supposed to be that narrow or difficult. David's the gatekeeper to make sure we're not constantly bombarding town council with questions that could be answered in another direction, but this is a serious issue, and it sounds like you've got a number of different issues. I think, David, can you work with Daryl to get those questions to Barbara?
We email. We set up at the request of the selectmen for Monday, October 19th.
That's the general meeting, but I'm talking about even before that. I think it sounds
right.
It
It would be
like,
good to go before.
Yeah, it sounds like the Board of Health Chair has specific questions
Right.
that will
Yes,
pertain to their review.
The Board of Health should have legal counsel. That just seems so obvious.
Nobody told them that they couldn't have legal counsel.
So I just
So
want
we
to be
can
sure.
arrange that.
No, we were just trying to follow the process we knew before, not knowing whether it could be opened up, which was part of the reason for requesting a bigger meeting. So here we are, and this is
Yeah, no,
making
yeah, I think the
progress,
idea
so-
that you have to vote on specific questions and run the questions through David is not really the case. The general topic, and David can make those arrangements with you to get Barbara or whoever's their
And it
expert.
shouldn't be at a meeting with 30 other people. You need a meeting with council to deal specifically with your issues. And I want to be sure that we don't leave here tonight without the town administrator and the Board of Health being on the same page, that there will be counsel available directly.
Okay, and then the,
Does that apply also to the ZBA and Concom?
The ZBA says that they have the counsel, all they need. But the other part of this is that the issue that the hydrologist is needed for is not just a Board of Health issue. It's also a Concom issue. And because it spans two boards, it's kind of unfair to say, well, it's a Board of Health hunt, let them seek the money and so on. I think it's a more general issue. The two relate because the project's too close to the wetlands, and the wetlands are what
Can I
protects
ask a
the...
question?
Sure.
So just to be clear, the hydrologist will work for the Board of Health?
can.
Or you.
Can.
I think it should work for the
I
Board
don't
of Selectmen.
think it has to be limited to one, but we certainly have whole sets of questions that we've come up with, and we've just been waiting because we really
Well, somebody
can't
needs to
evaluate,
manage
so.
the project.
You're working for the town. You tell us.
Yeah, I think the town administrator should manage it. That's how we've done it in other
I
towns.
assume there are questions you would want the hydrologist to answer, and you'd want to have them answered from a neutral standpoint. You don't represent the residents, you don't represent the applicant, you're trying to make a judgment. And
Right, we're just trying to collect the science so we can evaluate whether we're protecting the people who are going to be living in the project and around the project.
and you know, with all due respect to Paul identifying this as an important townwide project, I still don't see us as the ones who should be retaining and reviewing the work of the hydrologist. I think that's the Board of Health and the Conservation Commission and the Board of Appeals. I just don't see the Board of Selectmen in that role. That doesn't seem
Oh.
right.
Now, I would see it from the authorization of the funds, I think, is how we're reviewing it.
And
Again,
if-
because we don't have that kind of discretionary budget,
It's not just...
and I don't know how we go about getting that.
It's not just obtaining the funds. We have the chief procurement officer. He knows how to procure the services. He knows how to define the scope. He knows how to make sure that the work gets done in accordance with the contract. He is in a position to make sure that all follow-up is done. He can monitor the budget, all that kind of stuff. But other boards and committees, while they may have some skills in that area, we have the guy who works for us, who is the guy who does it.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
It seems like that next meeting, we're all going to be together. David has time between now and then to work with legal counsel, such that, hang on, I'm not done yet, such that somebody could make a pretty precise plea on what we should be doing. Because I wouldn't be against it, but nobody's really making the case on exactly what it is this hydrologist should be doing. They're just saying I don't even think the hydrologist has enough information out of him, and he would probably agree to start working on it yet.
I don't agree with
But-
that. I think the hydrologist shouldn't be limited to what the developers propose.
But I'm saying nobody understands the process right now. Between now and that meeting, David can get legal counsel, we'll have legal counsel in our meeting, and we can have a pretty precise understanding of what we're doing. Because it's kind of just been thrown at us in the past 10 minutes.
I also know we've got a guest from DEP here on another subject, and we've gone pretty far on this. I think we have to kind of wrap up this discussion fairly soon and get on to the other discussion.
And to further my point, there's only, I think, one conservation member in here, but I think that they should be involved in exactly the pitch that's being made.
Well, they may, of course they should be involved, but the point is, the reason why I asked for it to be on the agenda is for us to do something. And part of what needs to be done, as I think I said in the introduction to this thing, is that we need to do more than what we've done so far. And part of doing more is making town council available, but also getting somebody to look at the issue that's been identified in this recent case, as Attorney Hill had said, and have them focus on those kind of principles. Does it apply here? Doesn't it apply here? What are the threats to the neighbors and to the town as a whole? And have that guy go forward and do something. So, and all of these things should be, I mean, I can see us voting to seek the funding for this and to go forward with the hiring, subject to some conditions. And if I had to make a motion, that's what I would make.
Can I make a suggestion, Paul?
Sure.
That, I mean, if the Board of Health came to us with a request for reserve fund transfer to fund this, we would vote on it, right?
Yeah.
We'd vote it up or down. So my suggestion to the Board of Health would be, or anybody else, is bring us that request.
That's kind of what I'm saying.
But we can
I just don't want the
initiate the
request to come
request
from
ourselves.
Paul.
Well, I think there's a certain sense that people still want to learn more about it.
The process for their department to request something like that is to meet with the finance director, and then she will kick it off with bringing it to the Board of Selectmen and advisory. They don't necessarily bring it directly to you.
And then I think it also brings something a little more detailed to it about how much this is going to cost and who they're going to use and so on and so forth.
And so I guess I'm also, given how this was described, I'm surprised that Mr. Stevens doesn't also want this study done. It sounds like it pertains directly to the project and the effects of the project for good or for bad. And do you have that information? Do you want that information?
Could I?
Yeah, please.
Just to clarify, and just because I hate misinformation, that seems to happen a lot, and Dan, I'm surprised. I think you should read the court case. It wasn't necessarily about nitrogen. It was about the inability of the board to review the alternate analysis and or the developer to provide a counteractive response. It was basically the issue was ignored. And then it went from Housing Appeals Court to Land Court to Superior Court, or I'm not sure the process, but it was basically a substance. It wasn't a function matter of the site. It was a procedural matter on how it was dealt with. Now, and to answer another question, there are multiple options. We are currently redesigning the entire septic treatment area to reduce the nitrogen to an acceptable level. Now, that doesn't mean someone won't come up with a new argument, but that's a fool's errand, and you better not only reserve money. Quite honestly, the money you should be reserving is for legal, because it's going to be a procedural analysis as opposed to a technical analysis, because you're already paid. I'm already paying for the technical analysis. What will happen is, and I don't, under 40B, I'm responsible to the third-party consultants, and my engineers and the third-party consultants have spent a lot of my money going back and forth. That's what they do. I will not be responsible, or nor answer, nor care what this report says. If your ZBA cares, that's fine, but it will be probably in direct contrast to your peer review, because I will have to get the peer reviewers to a certain comfort level with what system I'm designing and my offsets and so on and so forth. So quite honestly, your budget more should be legal than it is for a hydrologist. So there are plenty of options left. I believe in the Carlisle case, they didn't explore a lot of the options. They just sort of pushed forward and decided, you know, be damned, the developer is going to do what he wants to do, and he's not going to even explore other options to help mitigate the situation. But I'm paraphrasing.
You might be surprised to find out that there are lawyers on the Board of Appeals who actually have read the case.
Yeah, but I think that just shows the dilemma we're in, actually. I mean, that,
I think we've heard we have a process. Let's use it.
we have a process, and I just don't think this board should be in a position of procuring an advocacy report. If we need to procure a report that provides information that's not otherwise going to be provided, that's one thing. But I don't see us in a position of procuring a report that takes a position one way or the other than a position based on the science.
But if a board comes to us and requests funding for something, then we can debate that.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I respectfully dissent because I think we should be initiating this, regardless of whether or not the Board of Health took a vote or didn't take a vote or figured out they needed this or didn't know that they needed it. At the end of the day, I know that we need it as a community, and therefore, in order to represent the people of the town, I think we need to have this done. And we often initiate reserve fund transfers, and there hasn't been, it's not a deviation from procedure, it's one that we often do. The sense I got from the Board of Health is that they aren't even sure of some of the processes that are involved, but we know the processes because we do it fairly frequently. And we know that they need a hydrologist, and for the reasons stated by Attorney Hill, there needs to be someone who is not the developer's hydrologist, but who's going to provide his own independent evaluation. And I see that this is important to the people who are going to be living at this facility, to the neighbors, and to the community as a whole. So I see it as a justifiable expense to support getting to the truth. And based on the Horsley report, the truth is going to be that this project is too dense for this site. Horsley, I know, is and have worked with in the past. He's an excellent guy. It was a good choice. So I can see where this would go. I'm also mindful of the fact that there are deadlines on 40B things, and it's nice to hear that the guy, the developer, is amenable here at this meeting to an extension, but at the end of the day, will he actually sign an extension and agree to it? That has to be done at the Board of Appeals level, not here. That's not our jurisdiction, obtaining extensions or not obtaining extensions. We should be planning and acting without regard to extensions. We need to do the right thing in a timely way. So I dissent.
Okay. I think we should get on to the next item unless anybody wants to continue this discussion.
There are some people who want to be heard.
Well, we've heard from all of them except for Jeff Waldron, so Jeff, do you have something to add?
Yes, sir.
So I'll be very brief. I'm Jeff Waldron, Surrey Lane. I'm on the advisory committee also. And I think you're right. I think we do need to have a formal request to you if we want funds, that whatever entities have to submit the request. The only thing I think, and I should point out that I haven't discussed this with advisory yet. We have a meeting next Wednesday, and I'm going to try and get it put on the agenda. So this is really my personal view, not the advisory committee's review. But I really think we do need to have an independent investigation, and we need to fund it. And I think the way I think of it is not just an advocacy, and it gets at Mark's question, and you said a little bit of that too, Michael, is that I think that we really don't have standards in town for these complex sites with multiple wells and state-of-the-art septic systems. They're not single well, more traditional septic systems. So I view that part of this analysis, while it's site-specific, will also inform the town on how to deal with 40B projects that have these dual complex systems. So I think ultimately, and I'm speaking for the Board of Health, which I probably shouldn't, but I think ultimately we're going to need to upgrade our standards in town so that we're not reinventing the wheel every time, and we're also can do it in a more timely fashion. So I think the investment in this study will yield more benefits than just to this specific project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mary. Oh, okay, Bob.
Robert Johnson, 27. I'm sorry, were you?
No, that's okay, Robert. Go ahead. You both can go. We'll let you both go.
Robert Johnson, 272 Western Avenue, and I'm on a butter. And I'd like to make 2 points. The first one is, in the Board of Health's motion that they passed last night, it was very specific what information they wanted the study to produce. It was far from vague. It was right to the point of exactly what they wanted. And we as a town need that information. Okay, the second thing is, as an abutter, I'm concerned, a lot of the discussion has been about water quality. And I don't think this project is going to affect my water quality because I happen to be uphill. The gradient isn't great, but I hope that it doesn't affect my water quality. But I'm concerned about my water quantity. And no study that they're doing is going to assess what is going to happen to my water quantity. According to the current zoning Board of Appeals, our regulations, I'm sorry, the Board of Health, well, the zoning regulations, I'm sorry, there can be one house on that lot. If one house goes on that lot, I'm not at all worried. They're proposing 36 units on that lot. That's going to draw a lot of water. I'm concerned if that's going to affect my well, the quantity of water that I have. Will my well go dry? And nothing that the developer is presenting addresses that. And I think it needs to be addressed. And this is what an independent study would do, among other things. It would address the water quantity available to other people, as well as those 36 units on the site. Personally, I don't care if they run out of water. That's their problem. That's going to be a big problem for them. But I care if I run out of water. And to a certain extent, what's going to happen if they run out of water? As it was mentioned, there's no plan B. If they run out of water, are they going to truck it in from
we really
the MDC?
We get the point. We really do have to keep this moving. And Marion, if you could keep it very quick, and then we're going to go on to the next item.
Very quick. I'm on the Board of Health, as you know, Marion Neuter, Prospect Street, but I'm not speaking for the Board of Health. The Planning Board, sorry. I'm not speaking for the Planning Board here. I'm speaking for myself. I'm speaking as a scientist, basically. We need, as a town, and certainly as a backdrop to this project, an objective assessment of hydrological conditions, which are complex at that site. There's very permeable sandy soils. There's bedrock. There are various,
we get
etc. You need an objective assessment.
Thank you.
It should not and must not be seen as advocating for either side. And I should think the developer would find it very useful to have that sort of data that go beyond what they are proposing or asking the peer reviewer to review.
Okay, thanks. So thanks everybody for coming out and for keeping the discussion on point. That's much appreciated. And I don't know that we have any action item at this point, but hopefully we'll get that Board of Health vote from last night in front of us for our next meeting. And we
also, it sounds like you're looking for dollar value.
Request for reserve fund transfer.
Yeah, and you can work with David, Daryl, if you would, and just set up what we need for the next time we meet. Okay? Thank you.
I'll add
2 weeks.
one more point that came up at the end. I want to support the peer review process that's in place. I think it's good. The town played part in selecting who the peer reviewer would be. They are independent, and it's paid for by the applicant. I think it's a great process. because we haven't received all the information and there have been some discussions at meetings, it's unclear that the applicant, whether the applicant feels that they need to provide all the information that we think is necessary to make a decision. That's part of the gap I was talking about, is will we feel comfortable?
Okay, thank you. Yep. And you may want to stick around for this next discussion. We've got a guest from DEP here and some people who are going to talk about the general chemical site. Mark, do you want to, I think you can lead this part of the discussion if you want. And
Sure.
And we've got Roger Demler also, who's been the town's point person on this project. For a second. Okay.
You might want to take a 2-second break just so people can...
Yeah. Well, they're going to want to set up. I just didn't want to, our guest has already been here a while watching that discussion, so. Okay. And welcome to our guests. Thank you for showing up and for sitting through, hopefully was an interesting discussion. I think this is going to be an interesting discussion, and this is the other side of town, and you can see we deal a lot with groundwater and other issues in Sherborn, so. Thank you.
I'm Roger Demler. I live on Maple Street, and about 10 years ago I volunteered to monitor what was going on at General Chemical, figuring, well, how long could this go on for? But it's kind of like a Board of Selectmen meeting. We have with us this evening a couple of people from the state DEP. Stephen Johnson's in charge of cleanup for the New England region, and Rodine Lampkin and her sidekick Jack have been doing all the heavy lifting for the past 3 years on this project.
Roger, pull that mic to you.
Okay. And there are several people in the audience that have been involved. Carol Boyce with Framingham has been doing a lot of engineering for them on this subject. And three professional engineers in town have been helping us on this too, and it's Darrell Beardsley, Andrea Stiller, and Brian Moore have been involved. In fact, we had a meeting with these people last week trying to understand what they wanted to do and sort of bought into their strategy. So I would like to say that about 3 years ago, these people took over the cleanup process from another group of the DEP, and I'm happy to report they've been much more aggressive about doing this, much more forthcoming. They got much more involved in the details. Early on, our concerns about wells led them to pay for, with state money, testing of 20 wells in the town of Sherborn. Normally, the General Chemical would have paid for something like that, but there wasn't any obvious connecting link between the two, so there was no way to obligate General Chemical to pay, so they stepped up at the plate and tested 20 wells, and he's going to be talking about the details of what they found and what they want to do next, and I'm pretty encouraged by this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Roger. As Roger said, my name is Steve Johnson. I'm working at Mass DEP in our Wilmington office. We cover the northeast part of the state and the greater Boston area. I've been working at Mass DEP for 31 years, I think, and Rodine has been there for 30 years. So we've seen a lot of different kinds of cases over the years. I was asked to, Diane, I've been speaking with Diane about coming to the meeting tonight, and she just thought that if I could give a little background, it would be helpful. And so when I was putting my thoughts together about it, I just figured maybe it'll help if I put it in a PowerPoint and people could walk along with me. It's good to understand the background of this site. The General Chemical site has been used for industrial purposes since the 1920s. It was originally used for petroleum storage and dispensing, and eventually they got into other hazardous materials. They were licensed in 1986 to manage hazardous wastes. I think that, you know, whenever we deal with sites that have been around for that length of time, going back into, you know, prior to the 1980s, then it's safe to say that people did not manage hazardous waste as carefully as they do nowadays. There was no laws and regulations, and maybe even no understanding of the impacts that mismanagement or poor management might have. So as a result of the history, there were, I use this term, releases of hazardous waste. Releases is a bureaucratic term that we have that if you look at the definition, it includes spillage, leakage, discharge, dumping, everything. And so we know that there's quite a bit of contamination out there. The principal contaminants we're worried about are the chlorinated solvents. These are listed here: tetrachloroethylene, trichloroethylene, a breakdown product, dichloroethylene, trichloroethane, and then this other chemical, 1,4-dioxane, which is a chemical that we're more interested in more recently. It's what we've characterized as what you call an emerging contaminant, because it hasn't always historically been looked for at our waste sites. And these chemicals, tetrachloroethylene, trichloroethylene, trichloroethane, are common industrial and commercial solvents. Tetrachloroethylene, for those that don't know, is the primary dry cleaning solvent that all the dry cleaners use, which is why we have so many dry cleaners in our list of waste sites. The studies that began at the General Chemicals site in the late 1990s, and there's been quite a lot of testing at that facility over that time frame. There's been most of the soil sampling has been at the Leland Street facility where General Chemical operated, and then there's actually been over 100 monitoring wells installed. I think some of them have gotten damaged, so I put down there's 90 plus or minus monitoring wells that are still available for testing. And we look at shallow, deeper, and even there's some bedrock wells as well. There's been sampling of surface water and sediments over the years, sampling of water in the MWRA aqueduct. There's some leakage of local groundwater that's getting into the aqueduct. Not that the aqueduct is transmitting any drinking water or anything, but water is leaking in. It's as everyone I think knows, it's over 100-year-old structure. And then there's also been some testing of indoor air, both in some of the homes near the facility on Leland Street, and we've done some state testing with our mobile lab at the Wilson Elementary School. So that few minutes of talking fast covers about 15 years of time in terms of what's been done. So I hope everyone recognizes that I'm giving a very brief synopsis in the interest of time. Currently, General Chemical is subject to an administrative consent order that we reached with them in 2013. The consent order requires them to meet all of the requirements of the state cleanup program. It includes long-term monitoring of certain monitoring wells, what we identify as key monitoring wells. They're the wells that tell us that we think are most representative of the plume and where the plume has come to be located. And the long-term monitoring also includes surface water and water that's in the aqueduct. I mentioned the next bullet that follow-up actions are required. We recently gave a conditional approval. We sent a conditional approval letter to General Chemical for what's called their comprehensive site assessment. And in that approval letter, we told them that there were certain things we wanted them to amend or fix, and we gave them several months to do that. So the letter went out in August, and they have until November to do those follow-up actions. At that point, then we're pushing the case forward towards remediation. We would really like to get to a point where we have they're under a schedule to give us a draft remedial action plan next February, and we'd really like to be able to get to that remedial phase in the next calendar year. I mentioned also that there's a public involvement plan. We put all of the major milestones out for public comment, and we do get a lot of comments. Roger Demler mentioned, in particular, commenting on the things that he's concerned with the Sherborn wells. I recognize a few of the public involvement participants from Framingham, in addition to Carol, who are here, and so they can tell you that that we do have a what's the word, active public involvement group. It's quite well attended. So this map is a map that Rodine and Roger mentioned that we also have another fellow that's working, spending a lot of time in this case. His name is Jack Miano. And they put this together to, again, it doesn't represent all of the monitoring wells, but it represents what we think are representative wells. And you can't see the numbers that are on those little tags, but that's not why I put it up. We put it up so that I could show that the yellow wells represent shallow groundwater monitoring wells. The white tags indicate the deeper, intermediate kind of monitoring wells, and then the blue indicates the bedrock wells. And these wells show that there's a high degree of contamination at the facility and immediately down gradient of the facility. We believe that there's been enough spillage and leakage and releases of solvents so that it's present in separate phase. There's actually product that it's not dissolved in the groundwater, and that is going to represent an ongoing continuous source of groundwater contamination until it gets cleaned up. And then in the direction in the south and east, the map is oriented with the north pointing up. So in the south and east direction, the concentrations gradually get lower, and then in the monitoring wells that kind of are on the furthest south and east around the Exelon facility, those wells indicate where we've tested so far. And what we see in all three zones, the shallow, the intermediate, and the deep, is that the plume has attenuated to a high degree. Okay? And then this other map, these maps are also, we brought a hard copy in the event that people wanted to take a closer look after the presentation. I didn't bring a laser pointer with me, but
Show us where Sherborn is, Roger.
Sherborn's down here.
Aqueduct.
Here's the railroad.
Okay.
Here's the aqueduct. Speen Street is
At the very top.
right there, going that way.
That's Meadowbrook.
that's Meadowbrook, where all those symbols that are there indicate the private wells that we tested 3 years ago.
General Chemical is way over here.
There's a blue tag.
That little blue square there?
Square.
Yeah.
It's a little over a mile between there and Speen Street, so we get some idea what the scale is.
Yeah. So Roger doesn't have a microphone with him, but he said it's a little over a mile between the General Chemical facility and the Meadowbrook area. The other thing of note is there's a little yellow symbol where the Exelon facility is, and that's roughly where we've seen the attenuation of the contaminant plume. I'm sorry, I thought about 10 times about bringing a laser pointer, and then I never did it, so I'm sorry.
We broke somebody's car antenna off. So
Go back to what that yellow is.
That's Exelon.
That's the Exelon facility.
Switching station and a peaking station there. Electrical.
Isn't that the school? Where's the school?
The school is right here.
That's actually General Chemical. The school is just a little
Above
bit,
it?
yep, right there, yeah.
There's a school right here.
That's the school, yep.
Okay. So the plume is traveling, first it's going more in a southerly direction, and then it would head off to the south and mainly east, yes. Okay?
And what's the green shading?
Those are just the wetlands, delineated wetland spots. So in the testing that was done 3 years ago, we did...
Could I point out?
Yep.
There's a drainage ditch that comes from here and goes into Meadowbrook.
Corsebrook.
Corsebrook, excuse me, and runs through here and out that way.
Yep.
The aquifer that we're talking about, the
Aqueduct.
aqueduct we're talking about goes through here. There's a drain there that dumps into Corsebrook.
Right. There's something called a weir that, it's not a dam per se, but it's a weir that directs flow. Any water that's in the aqueduct, it directs it into Corsebrook. Okay? So the testing we did 3 years ago found very low levels, trace levels, if you will. There were of several different contaminants. There's 3 wells that had traces of methyl tertiary butyl ether, MTBE, and that's the only source for that really is a gasoline source. Those levels were less than a part per billion, and the drinking water standard for MTBE is 70. Those are also in an area hydrologically that we don't really expect the general chemical plume to go in that direction. But at the time, Roger proposed those wells, as well as the Meadowbrook and Coolidge Street wells, as areas that were the ones that were closest in Sherborn to the Framingham site. The other wells that were found to be contaminated, they're identified with the yellow insignia. Thank you. And there was 5 wells in that area that had traces of tetrachloroethylene. And if you remember an earlier slide, tetrachloroethylene is one of the contaminants that's found at high levels at the general chemical site. And then 2 of those 5 wells also had very low levels, and when I say low, I'll put it in units. It's basically parts per trillion, 80 and 89 parts per trillion of this chemical 1,4-dioxane. And 1,4-dioxane is an industrial contaminant that is found in the general chemical plume. It is used as a solvent stabilizer. So where you have some of these chlorinated solvents that I'm referring to with the trichloroethylene and ethane, it's not uncommon to find this chemical as well. Okay? The concern with 1,4-dioxane is it's very soluble and it can travel faster and further than some of the other larger organic chemicals. And so that, I think, is some of the concerns that I've been hearing from Roger, Andrea, Brian, and the Board of Health from Framingham. Okay? So we have heard the concerns, and I think it was Roger alluded to earlier, the making the connection to the general chemical facility. There's some reasons to think, you know, that this could be connected to the general chemical facility, and then there's other reasons that to suggest that it wouldn't be. And so it's kind of like lines of evidence kind of an evaluation. Tetrachloroethylene, which has been found in some of those wells, the private wells, at less than a part per billion, and to put it in context, the drinking water standard for that chemical is 5 parts per billion. So we're less than 1. Okay.
Except in Sherborn.
Is that?
Except in Sherborn.
Well, that's the EPA safe drinking water standard.
What's that? Yeah.
That's the EPA and Massachusetts safe drinking water standard. The thing with the tetrachloroethylene that's found there is it can be in household and other commercial products, and it was also a key component in a number of septic system cleaners that used to be available 10 or more years ago. And so there is, you know, I have at least one case that I worked on where the tetrachloroethylene that was found in private wells was attributed to the septic systems that were nearby. And the other factor that when we talked, we had about a 2-hour technical session with Andrea and Brian and Roger in our office last week, which I appreciate the time that they took out of their work to come and talk with us. But the point with the tetrachloroethylene is that it is not as soluble as the 1,4-dioxane, and it's not as soluble as the other chlorinated solvents. So if this plume was coming from general chemical, we would expect to see other chemicals that are in the plume that are at general chemical in these private wells, and we're not seeing that. The 1,4-dioxane is something that is, as I said, an emerging contaminant. We're finding it. We have a big problem in the town of Burlington, where this chemical is coming from a site with chlorinated solvent contamination. There's some other places in Massachusetts and New England that are finding this chemical in much greater locations than in the past. The problem with the dioxane is that is also in household and commercial products, principally detergents and soaps and things like that. Rodine pointed out to me that in the literature, the Tide detergent, for instance, used to have percent levels, meaning over 10,000 parts per million of 1,4-dioxane in the product in the past. And recently they've come out with what they call dioxane-free product, dioxane-free Tide. But some of the problems with these chemicals is when they get released to the environment, then they stick around for a long period of time. They're not all that amenable to biodegradation as much as maybe some petroleum constituents might be. So, given that, we have a concern whether we can attribute the trace level of contamination in the private wells to the general chemical facility. The Exelon facility where it's been delineated to is about 4,000 feet away. It's also fair to say that there have been levels of these chemicals found in Coarse Brook and in the aqueduct closer and into Sherborn, but we're talking about parts per billion levels, not the kinds of pure solvent levels that we're finding closer to the general chemical facility. So what we decided to do is we have decided to retest the wells in that Meadowbrook area. I think there's 15 or 16 wells in that area that we tested 3 years ago that we can test again and compare with what we found 3 years ago and see if any levels are different or getting higher. And at the same time, we also think that in terms of trying to address the uncertainty as to where this stuff might be coming from, if we took samples that would be typical of septic system discharges, things like surfactants, nitrate, and what was the third thing we came up with? Caffeine, which is very often seen in septic system areas. If we tested for those things as well, it might give us some more information as to whether it's coming from a source other than the septic systems, in which case, it would be a stronger line of evidence that might be coming from general chemical plume. So I asked Rodine, where are we with respect to sending out letters to the residents? And she's got them all done. They're just waiting to be dated. But we wanted to have this presentation first. We wanted to have a meeting with Roger and I didn't know at the time he wanted to bring Brian and Andrea, but it's great because they work in this field as licensed site professionals, so it's great to have the input from other perspectives. And I wanted to meet with them first, and then also wanted to meet at this meeting before we went and sent letters out to the residents. But we can send those letters out as early as tomorrow. We also have to do some paperwork to get the money authorized, but we expect that we'll be able to get that and do the testing later this month. So with that, I'd be glad to entertain any questions.
Well, I was the person who sort of kicked this off, so I guess I'll take the conversation. I guess the first thing I would like to say is I'd like to thank you for coming out tonight. And I know we're running behind schedule, but we really appreciate you coming out and taking us through this. I'd also like to thank you for the responsiveness that you've shown to our letter, and we appreciate that very much as well. Is anybody else from Sherborn who wants to say anything about this before we? I mean, I'm going to ask from somebody from the Board of Health.
Rebecca Honeywell, Board of Health. Actually, I am representing myself. 104 Woodland Street. All I wanted to say is that what is unique, and the reason that some of the standards that are the town and the state standards, relevance in this case is that most of our neighbors have a public water supply and we drink our own water. So even though these numbers may be small, they may be relevant.
Frank Hess, South Main Street. I wonder if you can tell us how far some of these contaminants flow in the aqueduct into Sherborn, and if they flow at all into Sherborn, since it's not being used, couldn't we plug that aqueduct to mitigate that part of the problem so it doesn't flow into Sherborn?
Our understanding is that the water is not flowing into Sherborn beyond that weir, which is at Coarse Brook. I don't know if I should put that figure up again. But there, where the aqueduct crosses Coarse Brook, there is a weir that directs any water that's leaking into the aqueduct. It directs it into the brook directly. Okay?
Couldn't you block it so it doesn't?
Come again?
Couldn't you block that so it does not flow into Coarse Brook?
I'm not sure if that would be a good idea, but that would really be the call of the MWRA that owns it. I'm actually meeting with them about the Sudbury Aqueduct because of another site in Framingham, and I could raise that issue. If I don't know if that would cause other problems if that aqueduct was blocked. I just don't know.
Steve.
It's to be recognized by the board.
Brian?
My name is Brian Moore. I'm a master's
Stellis B. I'm a groundwater commissioner in the town, and I'd like to, number one, thank the DEP for providing us with whatever information we've asked for. It's extra time on their parts, and I appreciate it. For the board's edification, I'd like to add that the word attenuation does not mean degradation or destruction. The word attenuation means mixing it with other water so the numbers go down. So we're talking about something that might not be as acute, but could still remain a chronic issue. Also, for the board's edification, I'd like to remind and everyone else here who doesn't know it, the MWRA aqueduct is not inactive. It is part of the MWRA public water supply system for the city of Boston, and I believe it was recently used in an emergency situation when the gasket broke at 128. 2010, thank you. Switch out 11. The only other point I wanted to make, and this really doesn't have to be in this forum, but the people who practice routinely get, it's the expectation that as a person who's working for a PRP at a site, if you have a potential exposure or what could be perceived as a potential exposure to a constituent of concern related to your disposal site, the onus is on the PRP and the licensed site professional to prove that it's not your exposure, that it's not originating from your site. And I would just like to point out that the department is the only entity in this room that has the power to request a general chemical follow through on confirming whether or not these detections are or are not related to their disposal site. And since we last met last week, I think you received the same email I did, we know that isotopic analysis is available as a tool in this evaluation, and we're spending public funds, taxpayer funds, to do well sampling when the PRP is sitting there undergoing phase 2, which is where you delineate your plume, and we have an opportunity maybe to hold their feet to the fire a little bit. They would probably love to prove that these wells are not being impacted by their site, so I'm wondering why they're not chomping at the bit to come out and take these tests and run the isotopic analysis, which we're pretty sure would definitively say yes or no, it's affiliated with the site or not. And it was just an observation, and those are my only comments.
Well, just to speak to a couple of things, the LSP for General Chemical does feel that they have delineated the extent of their plume. They feel that they've done an adequate characterization of their plume, and so they do not see. They actually, this is in the written record that that you can find on our online file, and they did say that they don't see the connection between the private wells and where they have delineated the extent of their plume. That was one other thing. Oh, the email you're referring to with the isotopic analysis. Yeah, I found that interesting. I do know that there's something called compound-specific isotopic analysis that is used. It's not commonly used at the sites that you and I and Carol and Andrea work on, but it is a tool that can be used. It's just more expensive, and the problem that I have right now is I am more familiar with kind of the old school way of looking at the possible septic system contributors, meaning the surfactants and the caffeine and the nitrates. I'm less familiar with how reliable, how certain it would be to spend the money to do the isotopic analysis. I don't know what kind of problems there are with the reliability, and you know, I don't know if it's very difficult to do or not. So
It might not even be a CAM method. You don't know.
yes, no, there wouldn't be. There would not be a CAM method.
But I'm just thinking that if, you know, the department always talks about lines of evidence, and let's
Oh
get
yeah,
another line of evidence.
I've used that term already.
Here's an opportunity for a PRP to, you know, keep themselves out of litigation with people who have, you know, chemicals in their wells. It's pretty small money when you look at the bigger picture from their perspective. You know, maybe the department could suggest it and see if they'd be willing to resolve this once and for all without having to use a bunch of state money to test wells.
Yeah. We're not eager to spend state money to do work that a responsible party should do, and we don't. And when we do spend state money and there's a responsible party that we feel is liable for that work, we threaten to sue them for treble damages. And I have worked on cases where we have done that, and we've set precedents in terms of getting treble damages. So this is, I was saying last week, I mean, this seems like all we do is we work on sites, and our job is to make sure that they get adequately tested. And so when people hear from us, usually it's not good news. It means that we haven't done enough testing or we haven't done enough cleanup, because otherwise they wouldn't be hearing from DEP. And that is what we do. And we have, excuse me, we have made General Chemical do a lot more testing than what they have proposed in their work plans to do. But the problem that I have, Brian, is we make reasonable requirements. And so when we have a situation where there's, we look at the lines of evidence and we have trouble being able to say that the plume that looks like it's fairly well delineated and 4,000 feet away from the private wells, I have trouble saying that we think that is close enough. Now, if it was across the street, that would be a different matter. But there's a long enough distance that, I mean, normally when we look at private wells, and you know this from working in the field, we look at contamination that might be present within 500 feet of a private well as an area that would be concerned. And in fact, even municipal wells, if there isn't a zone of contribution delineated, we use as a default a half-a-mile radius.
So I guess that's really what my concern is here, is that, I mean, we know that it's, let's say we know it's 4,000 feet away, but we're not going to know if it's here until it's here. And how can we find out when it gets to be 2,000 or 500 feet away? Because we're only testing the wells, right? And so, I mean, I think that's the real big concern, is once we find it, it's too late.
I hope not. I hope that's not the case. We have, General Chemical right now is on a semi-annual monitoring program that they're required to do. I believe the consent order, the time frame and the program is 30 years. And what they're doing may change over time. I mean, we're hoping that we'll get enough cleanup going that they won't maybe not have to do some of the testing that they're required to do now. But they have to test monitoring wells, these key monitoring wells that we've identified, as well as the brook and the aqueduct, twice a year for as long as we deem that necessary. And so if those levels start going up, then we'll know that there's a problem. But the facility has been closed since 2012. We know there's no further spills or anything going into the ground in that area. And so we're going to make sure we monitor that, but we're not anticipating that the levels are going to drastically go up higher.
I thought we knew that the levels were high in the aqueduct.
No, the levels in the aqueduct are we're talking parts per billion levels. They are detectable, they're present, but at parts per billion levels.
Okay, I thought somewhere I read they were quite high.
But we're not testing the groundwater.
We are testing the groundwater.
Between the site and the Sherborn wells?
Yes. There's about 80 monitoring wells that have been installed, 80 or 90. I think I used 90 on the figure. And of those, do you remember how many wells are tested as part of the semi-annual plan?
32.
There's 32 monitoring wells that we've identified as indicative, representative of the high levels of contamination and the lower levels down at the perimeter of their plume. And they're all in different levels: groundwater, bedrock, deep overburden, and shallow overburden. So we've got those areas covered, and we're doing monitoring, or not we, but General Chemical is required to do that monitoring twice a year. Their latest round was submitted to us in August.
And there are two new wells just downstream of the exit from the aqueduct in the ground next to Course Brook. There's a deep well and a shallow well. They don't in Sherborn. They don't show anything. It's like 2 blocks away from Meadowbrook.
Did you want to comment?
I have a question for you, just an informational thing. Given all the groundwater and various levels.
Could you go to the microphone?
Marion Neutral, Prospect Street. Given the fact that they've monitored the edge of this plume at the various levels, they're looking at it over the course of time, could you give us an idea of the rate of movement of the plume? Is it moving, and at what rate?
I don't have a figure for you in terms of hydraulic conductivity. The thing about plumes is, what we see is that over time, there comes, the plumes tend to stabilize, and they're very variable. It depends on the concentrations of chemicals in the plume, the amount or volume of a source that's creating those concentrations. It depends on the geology, the hydrology, and it depends on the head and what pushes the plume.
So that makes sense, but are they moving?
Well,
the last, say, 10 or 15 years?
The testing that's been done over the last 15 years at that site, the levels we're seeing, some of the wells furthest on the furthest south and east portion of this site have only been installed and monitored once or twice so far. Okay, but the other wells closer to the facility that have been installed as much as 15 years ago, we're seeing the same consistent kinds of levels, very high, very, very high at the facility. Well, we think we know where the edge is. It's just that we don't have data over many years the way we do for other wells.
And is something being done to extract or treat? In other words, you say you're seeing the same levels. You know it's moving. Presumably those levels are going someplace. But are you also controlling the source or
no remediation
mitigating?
Going
on.
Okay.
There was some remediation. I'm sorry. There's currently no remediation taking place. There was some back in 2005, 2007, but they were discharging it back into the ground after treating it, and it didn't go well. So they stopped that. Had them do more investigation, and that's what's actually we're expecting in February is their proposed remedial plan.
So when you say
we're anxious to get there.
So when you say the levels have stayed relatively high at the same locations, does that suggest the plume isn't moving, or that those levels are dissipating beyond the monitoring wells to some other location?
Yeah, there's both migration and some. The major part of the source of the contamination is going to stay at and near the facility. Those solvents, the pure solvents, don't migrate that far, that fast. They get stuck where they are pretty much. But then they bleed the contaminants from the source over many years. And some of this contamination may have been out there for many decades. And we see in other sites, we have sites that they stopped using solvents 20 or 30 years ago, and we still see large levels of contamination. So until there's remediation underway to remove or destroy the contaminants, then there will be a problem of groundwater contamination out there for our lifetimes.
Well, we recognize some of the people are lining up.
Yeah, we've got two more town officials.
Maybe you should speak. It's part of my issues for answering this.
Andrea Stiller. I am an LSP also, and I'm on the Conservation Commission in town. And you're talking about what's moving. I'll tell you what's moving, and that's Coarse Brook and the water in the aqueduct. And historically has been moving from the general chemical ditch to our town. And even recent data from the town of Sherborn and correct me if I'm misinterpreting the data, in the town of Sherborn, data in the Coarse Brook and in the aqueduct are an exceedance of drinking water standards for PCE and dioxane. And we're not drinking that water. Sherborn's not drinking its surface water. But those concentrations are in the town of Sherborn in exceedance of drinking water in those surface water bodies. And at one location, it's a stone's throw from a resident where one of the contaminants is being found. Don't know that there's a link between what has been and what is currently traveling through those surface water bodies is connected. We haven't, confirmed, and that's, DEP is agreeing to do sampling, and we'll try and figure that out, or they will try and figure that out. Whether there's a link between what's in the surface water bodies and what's flowing into the town of Sherborn and what's in the drinking water wells. but it is proximate to us. And I agree that we should be doing every sort of testing we can to confirm whether there is a link, whether the source is from General Chemical, and there is no higher susceptible population, than a resident. I mean, that's, the ultimate. So I think we need to do everything and every possible testing, even if it's a little new to us.
Carol?
Hi, thanks for allowing me to speak. I'm Carol Boyce. I'm an LSP with the Town of Framingham Board of Health, and I've been working on this site for probably almost 5 years now. And I think you're all asking exactly the right questions. And I think the level of intense scrutiny on this is good. I think it's great that DEP has responded and agreed to come and test. But I think it's really important. It's got to be right. The reason it's got to be right is what happens with the Sherborn connection from General Chemical to the bedrock wells here is that it's going to drive what remediation gets done. So if the connection is made, there's going to be a different type of remediation that gets done and looked at in Framingham to keep that from happening, or potentially happening. I think that was a really good point. Maybe it's not here yet, but it could be here. And the bedrock, to a certain extent, is a little bit of a needle in a haystack. So there are some monitoring wells in the rock. Rodine pointed out 32 wells are being monitored, but only a subset of those are in the rock. And it's kind of a guess as to whether, they did a best guess as to where to install those wells. But it's like a needle in a haystack when you're looking for contamination in the bedrock. So it's got to be right, because if you don't get that connection and you miss it, and the remediation doesn't address that, then Sherborn wells are at risk. So I don't think it's a lot to ask to say 1,000. We sent this email, just sent it this week. I know it's just came out suddenly, but I've been trying to keep up with some other sites we have in Framingham, and we suggested this isotope sampling. We can give, you guys the name of the forensic chemist we talked to. It was a guy at Newfields. They do this frequently. I don't know the certainty that it probably won't be a slam dunk, but as Brian said, I think it's lines of evidence we want. It's $1,000 a sample, which is a little bit more. Probably normally it's about $100 or $200 a sample. But to me, if General Chemical has spent probably at least $200,000 in the last few years on this, spending $5,000 is chump change. It's nothing. It needs to get done, and that will help settle some of this issue. It will help point us in a direction that is one way or the other, because I can tell you that in Framingham, they tried to do a pilot test, as Rodine said, and they actually pushed the contamination closer to the school. It was a disaster. Everybody freaked out because obviously the elementary school is one thing that we really want to protect, and that wasn't done right, and it wasn't monitored correctly, and it was done because they didn't know the extent of contamination right in their own operating area, not even in the general larger part of the plume. So that's why I think that's really important to point out. I think I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about bedrock wells while we're throwing them around? The best well drillers around come to Sherborn, and they go to a site, and they can drill 800 feet and not hit water. He can move 50 feet, drill into bedrock, and then another 60 feet and hit 40 gallons a minute. So how do you know your bedrock well isn't 40 feet away from the contamination? Or you drilled right past it and you never hit it?
You don't. That's
So
the
what
nature.
good is it?
That's the nature of bedrock.
So what does that test tell you?
Well, I'm not sure what you're getting at. There's a finite number of monitoring wells that we would install to see what the impact is in the bedrock. There are 8 wells that we had installed. We were planning to, I shouldn't say plan, that's not the right word, but I guess I should say I was expecting that we were going to find a lot more contamination at the bottom part of the overburden, the soils above the rock. And we had them do a drilling process where they did continuous testing of the soil that comes up as they drill down. There's the continuous split spoon screening. And where they found the contamination at the top of rock, they were to go into the rock and put in a monitoring well and do testing there. And in the majority of, the vast majority of the wells we had them do this process in, they found that the contamination did not go vertically down. It stopped in the tight till material above the bedrock. So we're not seeing a lot of connection between the contamination and the bedrock. It definitely is in the bedrock in some locations, there's no doubt about that. But we're just not seeing that kind of pure solvent. What the acronym is called DNAPL. It stands for dense non-aqueous phase liquid. But it's basically the pure solvent that got all the way down through the till and into the bedrock. We're just not seeing that. And so what we're seeing is fairly low. We're seeing attenuation in the soils as you go vertically down, and then what is in the bedrock, we're seeing a fairly low levels. There might be one well that the highest well had 1,000 parts per billion of dioxane, but in the other wells further as it went down gradient, in the down gradient direction, again the levels dropped off quite substantially. So you know, we use the word the word uncertainty has come up several times, many times tonight, and there's always going to be uncertainty when you're talking about contaminant migration in fractured bedrock, and that's why we do as much testing as we do. So I don't know, there's not going to be, I mean, we could install more wells that would give you some measure more certainty, but we're not going to be able to eliminate the uncertainty. Now, what I've proposed is to see if there's contribution from the septic systems in the private wells, then that could give us an answer as to where stuff might be coming from. If there isn't that connection, then we have to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, I have to say that from the data that I've looked at and that Rodine and our staff have looked at, we're not seeing the connection to General Chemical, and that's the only thing that is preventing us from requiring them to do more testing, more bedrock wells or other things. That's the only thing that's stopping us, is the data that we have so far.
So going back to the question about the aqueduct and the product and Andrea's comment, I mean, isn't that a surface water discharge? What you've got contaminant going into Coarse Brook? So yes. Doesn't somebody have to regulate? I mean, not regulate, but mitigate that. Doesn't somebody have to address that?
Yes, and I'm not sure what we can have them do until we get the remedy underway. We're trying to push forward on the remedy, and we don't want to push forward on the remedy to ignore the amount of testing that should be done first. In fact, several years ago, when Rodine and I first got involved with this case, there was a major concern that the amount of testing that had been done at the site wasn't sufficient in order for General Chemical to start remediation. That was 3 years ago. We agreed when we got involved, and so we did require a whole lot more investigation by General Chemical. And so now we're at the point where we feel like we have a better handle on the contaminant sources and the migration, and I don't think that we're going to be able to eliminate the discharge of chemicals into this brook or into the aqueduct until we address the sources of contamination near the site.
And if it gets into the brook and the brook floods, which it does all the time up there, then it's actually getting into the soils closer to these homes, right?
The only saving factor there is with the chlorinated solvents, they're very volatile, and so when you see the testing, in the drainage ditch that Roger pointed out, close to the facility, that's where the shallow groundwater discharges into the ditch, and then it flows in from there into Coarse Brook. The levels drop off pretty rapidly.
Could I have a turn
volatilization
here,
and dilution.
Mark, at some point? First, I want to thank Mark for bird-dogging this issue. This is a town that has no public water supply, and because of that, we all drink the water. We want to err on the side of not having any contaminants in the town at all, whether they're surface waters or whether they're in the bedrock or wherever. We don't want it in our town. We treat the whole town as essentially a Zone 1. And I want to emphasize that as you are thinking about what to do here, it's not just the wells at Meadowbrook. we don't want the contaminants in Sherborn at all. And because technology has limitations, which leads to uncertainty, as you yourself have said, we don't want the contaminants here because of the technological uncertainties as to where we'll go, where we'll end up, and what the impacts are, both short-term and long-term. So we, from my perspective, more action to address stopping it is far superior goal than doing the little pieces. And let's turn to the question that you have posed, that you can't decide on where to go because you don't see the connection, and so you're going to do some testing of wells on Meadowbrook. And I've been concerned all the way along here that we want the property owners on Meadowbrook to cooperate. I think it would be important for you to say here tonight why those property owners should cooperate with the testing on their wells. What is in it for them, and what is the downside for them? Doesn't it make sense? And if so, could you tell us and them why it makes sense for them to cooperate with this testing?
Well, the first thing comes to mind is that they'll have more information about the drinking water quality. I think that the concern that I've heard is that one round was collected several years ago, and although there was only trace levels detected, people are concerned that the levels could be higher, or maybe different wells could be contaminated. So this information will tell them more about the quality of their drinking water.
And if they consent, what is involved for them? What are they taking on?
I'm not sure what they're taking on. When we did the testing 3 years ago, we did get everybody on Meadowbrook that cooperated, and all we wanted to do was get access to an outdoor spigot so that we could take a sample. And you did the testing in 2 days, maybe? Yep. Took you 2 days to collect all the samples, and we collected 29 or 30 wells. Yeah.
Do you ask the homeowner to sign a piece of paper?
Yes,
Oh, yes.
we send a request for permission to enter their property and collect a water sample.
He talked about those letters could go out as soon as tomorrow.
Yes, I heard that. But I want to make sure that the property owners who are here or who might be listening understand what the implications are for them. And I've heard a concern that if the tests come back bad, does that mean their properties become less valuable, and they're not going to be able to sell their properties, and all of those concerns and fears. And I think the answer to that is that the testing has been very diluted. Isn't that correct so far? The testing has been below the standards.
Yes, well below.
Yes.
And there's no reason to believe that any of these results are going to come back with horrendously bad information.
I expect that the levels will probably be pretty similar as they were several years ago.
And so I guess my final point is, you do this testing, and part of it you say is not just to see what the levels are, but to see how it connects to septic systems, because you think that septic systems may be causing some of these readings. What will it take in those test results to convince you that there is a connection to General Chemical, and that therefore the remedial path is the greater steps rather than the smaller steps?
First of all, let me just clarify. What we're trying to do is rule out the septic systems. So it's not like we're trying to rule them in. We're trying to rule them out so that if it's not the septic system kind of input, then we need to look elsewhere for where it might be. And I think that before we could connect it to General Chemical, there would have to be a lot more testing.
Of what kind?
Probably, we'd have to figure out, I mean, right now I'm struggling with trying to figure out the migration pathway, whether it's all through fractured bedrock or whether it's from these part per billion levels that might be in coarse brook, and then if the brook is a losing brook in certain parts of the hydrologic cycle, then would they get into the groundwater and then from there get into the bedrock? So I'm having struggle trying to come up with a conceptual site model where it's associated with General Chemical, but we have to just look at this is what I say all the time. We just have to go out and collect some samples and go in the direction where the data tells us.
Could I suggest to you that you do not need to have nailed down an exact pathway from source to effect, that if there is an effect at drinking wells and you have no other explanation, that coincidences don't just happen randomly, and that you could, from that alone, find justification to require more action be taken rather than the less path. And I'm concerned that you're going to spend a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of resources trying to nail down the exact pathway from General Chemical to Meadowbrook Road, when I don't think we really need that. And to go back to what Selectman Brandon said earlier, we don't want to get to the point, let's say 5 years from now, when you say, Eureka, I found how it got there. It was a fracture in the bedrock. Boy, that's how those wells got contaminated. Why can't we today, even before the testing is done, pretty much get to the point where we take the steps that are necessary to protect Sherborn from whatever pathway it might be?
I guess the thing that I would like to hang my hat on is the whole. I hear what you say about making you don't need to have a smoking gun per se. You can, and the lawyers in my office would call it. We can make reasonable inferences. Okay, so if we don't have to have proof positive, but we do have to have enough to make a reasonable case that this is fair and reasonable. I basically, we have to manage this case the same way we manage any other case where there's public health concerns.
But where I'm trying to focus you on is your statement that if the septic systems are eliminated, now you're going to do more testing somewhere else to find out where things go. And I'm suggesting to you, if you eliminate the septic systems, you have enough to make an inference.
Okay. I'd just hold off on I would hold off on making that judgment until I look at the data and see what we can figure out. So I don't really like to speculate about what we might do depending on what we might find. I think we need to do what we can that we think is reasonable, and then look at what those results tell us.
Okay, I think we want to wrap this up unless anybody's got something new to add.
Chris Quinn, Board of Health. Just a couple of points. Thanks for being here, Steve. As far as the investigation which led to the Framingham Board of Health to close this facility in 2012, that was a local response that led to that closing. There were numerous pictures regarding toppled barrels of chemicals and leaking
stacked barrels that were to the roof of this facility. I think based upon that, and we know that the soil is contaminated, based on a bedrock well across the street at a car wash that is upstream from the direction of flow is contaminated, based upon the fact that your department was concerned about the data that was put in to the graphs on these reports was incorrect. And this company was called out to correct those mistakes on the pictures. I have concerns that conclusions are being drawn on data that's not correct. I guess Carol from the Framingham Board of Health probably has the most information on this site, and Roger. And I guess to the Board of Selectmen's point is, we know there were these barrels that were toppled over and contaminating the soil. Why can we not go after remediation when we know there is a PSP who has a parent company with Clean Ventures, I think it is, in New Jersey, that obviously could affect a cleanup with monetary, contributions to that cleanup. Kind of historically, looking at places like Needham, who had the exact same thing. In '95, there was a TCE spill from a microwave lab.
Yeah, we're familiar with that.
Yeah, Hillside School was right beside that microwave lab, showed elevations of TCE, which led to depressurizing systems underneath the school, correct?
Yes, we installed them.
And when the folks in Wellesley saw that Rosemary Brook was running in their direction from this contamination site, had Central Ave and Needham closed to install
Yes, I oversaw that job, yes.
a charcoal type impregnated
Zero-valent
barrier.
iron is the material that was
What
put
is
in
it?
the wells. It was called zero-valent iron. It catalyzed a reaction that destroyed the contamination.
Okay, TCE
Yes.
contamination. Okay, and I've worked in Attleboro since the late 90s, where not only is there a Superfund site in Attleboro, but beside it in Norton, the one in Attleboro has TCE, as well as hexavalent chromium, and that led to a cleanup after bringing in EPA and designating it a national priorities listing for Superfunding, upon which many millions of dollars was spent to dig up the soil and completely put in clean soil. So I know we want to wrap this up, but Carol has lots of research and pictures of the chemicals in the barrels that were spilt. We have your concern that we're going to have septic that is contributing to contamination, but we've already heard that Tide detergent isn't putting dioxane, so we would expect if there's any contribution from detergents, from septics contributing to this, that would diminish. So why not, what Mark says, get at it, start remediating, get this thing out of phase 1 or move it into phase 2 and remediation phase 3 and get some action on this thing.
That's exactly what we're doing.
Thank you. Okay.
Great, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. I think we do recognize you're on our side, and we rely on you in this, and you can tell how seriously people are taking it and how concerned we are about it. In our letter, we said we're concerned about. We talked about uncertainty, about the direction, the volume, and the speed of this thing, and I'm not sure I feel any more comfortable yet. I am encouraged by the additional testing, but I think what we have so far is just a snapshot, and at least from our perspective, right? and what we need is a video. And so I would just encourage you to do whatever it takes to give us that picture so that we know if you know, how fast this train is coming at us and if it's going to get here. So I think we'll ask you to come back as soon as there's some new information, and we'd like to keep this discussion going.
Sure. Yeah, we
But
appreciate
thanks
your
again.
your willingness to come into it. It was very nice of you to spend an evening with us, and appreciate it.
Well, I jokingly say we're going to open up a regional office in Framingham. We've been doing a lot of work in Framingham in addition to this site. They've got a few other sites that we're interested in.
That'll make the ride shorter.
Just so you know, you're on the PIP list, the Public Information Participation, so we hold those meetings at the Woodrow Wilson Elementary School. So next time there's a deliverable, then the draft would come out, and then there'd be a hearing, an informational meeting, where then people it starts the comment period. So that will be probably in March sometime next year. But
That's great.
Thank you. And Carol, thank you too for coming out.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. We can, David, I guess the next item we've got is Town Administrator Report, if you've got something.
I was just two quick things. One was the Middlesex Savings Bank ribbon cutting is at noon tomorrow. So we want to wish them luck. And then Abbey Road plans to do groundbreaking on Saturday.
Right. That's good.
That's it.
That's it? Okay. Sure. Oh, on General Chemical? All right.
Use the mic.
Joe, can you go to the mic, please?
It was interesting, the parallel of what testing General Chemical was doing and then other tests that people might perceive, and it related to the conversation that we had earlier in terms of people's interpretation of how much is enough information or the right information. So I just wanted to mention that, and then I fully appreciate the points you were bringing up of by the time it's detected, it's too late, and it's too late on two fronts. One is you have the impacts here in Sherborn, and two, that means that stuff is spread out, and the more it spreads out, the more expensive it is to clean up, the more technically and financially and administratively infeasible it becomes, and then it doesn't get taken care of. So that's it.
Thank you.
Great. Good. Thanks. So, David, you gave your report, and do we have any selectmen reports? Okay.
I got one plug. I got one plug.
Go ahead.
Breakfast with the selectmen with yours truly tomorrow morning with the Council on Aging. I think here.
Oh, it's right here.
It is?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Right there.
I'm pumped.
Excellent. It's great. It's a great time. You'll enjoy it. It will be thought-provoking, and I always, whenever I go to those, I always have something to bring back. I mean, there's really a great exchange of ideas. So, next meeting for October 15th. Everybody on board with that? That's 2 Thursdays from now. Okay.
Yes. It's already on, right?
Yeah, I think we did set that already. Good. And
Can we set the following one?
probably.
I don't have my November
Yeah,
schedule.
that's the problem.
It would be October 29th.
It'd actually be
October
29th, right?
Oh, the 29th is okay.
Yeah. Let's tentatively set it then, and then we can check next week and check with Chuck also, but I think that makes sense. Wow, 3 meetings in 1 month. Mix up for August.
We're getting so much
It's like a
done.
harvest moon.
Right, right. And then we've got a warrant here, a payroll warrant for the town administrator, so can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? We can just sign that.
So we've agreed on October 29th.
Yeah, at least
Okay.
tentatively agreed, but yeah, let's presume it's October 29th.
Mark.
Can I?
Yeah?
Did we adjourn?
We haven't adjourned yet. Nope.
Can we just throw something out for a future agenda?
Sure.
The that I might like to propose that we ask DSCTV to start working on plans to both recording and or televising all regulatory meetings. They seemed receptive to it when they were here.
Yeah,
Obviously,
although
it's not up for discussion now, but.
Yeah, no, I know, but just, I guess, maybe bring a proposal in, but when you say all regulatory meetings, I mean, what level are we getting to? Every single town board, or are you talking about planning board and board of health and Concom?
I was talking Board of Health, Concom, Planning Board. I guess that you should include ZBA, shouldn't you? Right?
Yeah, that would be fascinating. I'm sure people would be watching that. I don't know. I mean, some towns do that, and some towns also have a website on their, on their homepage where they link to the YouTube videos of every board's meetings.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say in support of that, I can't make, I mean, right now, obviously very interesting to go to the Board of Health meetings.
Absolutely.
I can't make them necessarily. To be able to go back and look at them during a period of, like we're going through now, would be a good thing.
Yeah, I think so. When we keep coinciding with them, maybe because we've been bouncing around.
And we talked with the board, with the administrator for the cable two weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And that's why I think we'd probably propose it in a way that they can, I mean, they might need some time to gear that up. He made it sound like it'd be pretty volunteer heavy, and I mean.
Yeah, I mean, and so this is Selectmen's report, so this is your report, and I guess the next meeting, we'll put it on the agenda and have a proposal, we can discuss it.
Right.
That makes sense.
Okay, and maybe that'll give David time to find out if we have the authority to do that over other boards that aren't under our jurisdiction. Can we tell the Board of Health they're going to start recording all their meetings? I don't know.
And they can tell us no, and then
right,
it's fine.
That'll go
But I mean, we can make a recommendation.
Right.
Yeah, I think so.
I think the only one that has, discusses confidential information is assessing meetings.
Oh, I don't know that we want to do assessing meetings.
No, but I'm saying they would be.
Is what meetings?
The assessors. You're not talking about the assessors.
They have meetings?
You're talking about development boards, basically, right?
Yeah.
Right, everything else is an open public meeting, and the SCTV, if they had the resources to record them, they would have a right to go there and record them.
They don't have the volunteers, is the issue.
Yeah. And that's what they said 2 weeks ago, too.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
As long as there's people who do it.
Well, they made it sound like the equipment wasn't an issue, and if it was, they somehow had the budget to afford it. Yeah, it's definitely the people, and then I don't want to strap them with something they
Right.
can't handle. I want to work towards it, I guess.
Okay, good.
With doing that, there's one other concern that you should have instead of a priority list, because a lot of these boards meet at the same time.
Yeah.
And
Right.
we only have one setup, so.
Well, right, and
you'd have
we
to-
brought that up because there's a Concom meeting right now at the police station.
Yeah.
I mean, the interesting thing is you can, I could tape a meeting on this practically, and you can post it to YouTube, and, you wouldn't have, if you really wanted to do it, you could do it. It's just a question of how.
Setting up separate
Yeah.
equipment,
And
yeah,
what
no,
level.
it could be done, it's just, you're right, the volunteers are.
Yeah, good. Do we have a motion to adjourn, or does anybody have any other business? No, motion to adjourn? Paul's moving to adjourn. Mark wants to adjourn also. Okay, all in favor? Excellent.
I want to stay here.